Heavenly Father, today we put on the full armor to protect us against attack. We put on the belt of truth to protect against lies and deception. We put on the breastplate of righteousness to protect our hearts from the temptations. We put the gospel of peace on our feet to walk in your light, peace, and freedom with the Holy Spirit. We rebuke anxious thoughts. We take up your shield of faith for protection to block and destroy all the darts and threats thrown at us by the enemy. We put on the helmet of salvation to cover our minds and thoughts, reminding us that we are children of a mighty King. We are forgiven, set free, saved by the blood of Jesus. We take up the sword of the Spirit, your living word, that has the power to demolish strongholds and is sharper than any double-edged sword. We come to you, Lord, in prayer daily. In Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
What's up, you guys? Welcome to The Imagination. I'm your host, Emma, and today I'm absolutely honored to introduce you all to satanic ritual abuse, mind control, and organized abuse survivor and overcomer, loving mother and devoted wife, artist, podcaster, and host of her own podcast, Arise and Shine, founder of Shout for Help nonprofit, facilitator for Relentless Hope, singer and songwriter, writer and blogger, videographer, advocate for future overcomers, author, speaker, written and spoken word poet, and my dear friend, Sharri Burggraaf. Sharri's life is a testament to the transformative power of faith, resilience, and purpose. Born on Friday the 13th, 1957, in Dubuque, Iowa, to a Catholic family, Sharri's early years were marred by unimaginable trauma. Subjected to ritual abuse, mind control, child pornography, and sex trafficking, her childhood was stolen by multiple perpetrators, including her parents, a priest, a nun, and even an elite network of businessmen. Under the guise of a gifted and talented program, she was bused from school to a free medical clinic where she endured torture-based mind control, electric shocks, medical experimentation, and psychological programming, deceptively framed as cancer research conducted by German scientists. Her father, a World War II veteran, was also ensnared in these sinister programs, and Sharri believes he was murdered to silence his attempts to escape with threats used to keep her enslaved. These experiences were designed to fracture and control, yet within Sharri, a spark of resilience refused to be extinguished. Diagnosed in the early 1990s with dissociative identity disorder, she embarked on a courageous journey of recovery. Her path was not linear or easy, but was a winding road marked by pauses to raise her children and moments of profound dedication to healing. From victor to survivor, Sharri has set her sights on thriving, embracing a life lived wholeheartedly despite the weight of her past. In the 1990s, she put her strength into action, founding Shout for Help, which equates to survivors helping others unite together, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting fellow survivors. Sharri has also become a voice for the voiceless, speaking at the Healing Together conference in Orlando, Florida, for 3 consecutive years, where she shared her expertise on ritual abuse and mind control. Through her YouTube channel, TikTok account, and the Arise and Shine podcast, she offers hope and experiential wisdom, demystifying the power of perpetrator groups and dismantling the fear that binds survivors. Her message is clear: recovery is possible, no matter how insurmountable the obstacles may seem. As a founding member of Dissociative Writers and a facilitator for Relentless Hope, Sharri also runs support groups and writing workshops, including her upcoming project, Justice Training Initiative for survivor clinicians, law enforcement, and advocates. Her work with Relentless Hope aligns with her heart for survivors, emphasizing their value, collective power, and right to be believed. As a beacon of light for survivors, Sharri challenges the stigma and disbelief surrounding ritual abuse and mind control. She confronts the societal denial that often compounds survivors' pain, advocating for awareness of human trafficking and the interconnectedness of ritual abuse and mind control with multi-generational abuse. Her mission is not to rescue single-handedly, but to collaborate with others, amplifying voices and fostering hope for those still trapped in the darkness. Sharri stands as living proof that one can emerge from the depths of trauma to shine brightly, guiding others toward their own liberation. Her journey reminds us that even in the face of unimaginable evil, the human spirit can reclaim its power, rewrite its story, and inspire a world in need of hope. To every survivor, Sharri's voice echoes, "You are not alone. If I can escape, so can you." Before wrapping up the introduction of today's guest, I'd like to share just a couple quick reminders and updates. If you're interested in being a guest on the show, if you wanted to share any information privately with me, or if you were interested in submitting a written testimony for my upcoming book series or to be featured on a Substack article, you can reach out to me via email at imagineabetterworld2020@gmail.com or standbysurvivors@protonmail.com. Additionally, I've teamed up with a couple of my favorite brands to offer you exclusive discount codes on products I love, such as Rife Technology frequency machines and CZTL's premium methylene blue. You can find all the relevant links and codes, along with other resources, down below in the show notes. Your support across all platforms is greatly appreciated, especially as I've had to shift to alternative streaming platforms such as Rumble and X following the extreme censorship that caused my last channel to be terminated on YouTube. I've just started a new YouTube channel recently, and you can subscribe to me there at the handle at Imagination Podcast Official that I am now streaming new episode premieres from weekly. This transition to multiple platforms is crucial to continue sharing vital information with the public and disclosure community. So thank you all wholeheartedly on the other side of the screen for helping to make the imagination the safest space on the internet for survivor, whistleblower, advocate, and educator disclosures. Your support means the absolute world to me and to every guest on the show. So you guys, without further ado, please help me in welcoming today's guest of honor, voice for the voiceless, anti-child abuse and survivor advocate, walking miracle, content creator, woman of God, and a woman on a mission to lead survivors from darkness to light with Christ at the center, proving that from brokenness, a relentless hope can rise. The one, the only, Sharri Burggraaf. Sharri, thank you so much for being here with us today. What an honor it is to have you on.
Well, Emma, it's an honor to be here with you, of all people. Thank you for all you do to give survivors a platform to share their stories and their amazing miracle life.
And you got that right. That's exactly what it is. And I feel that way every single time that I do one of these episodes. I just look at somebody like you in awe and look at your smile and how strong you are and courageous and brave and how nobody would ever know the past that you suffered and survived. And it really is. It's a miracle. It's a God-given miracle. And, we're so lucky that we get to be here with you, that we get to listen to what you have to say. And ultimately that we get to learn, this stuff has been so occulted from society. A lot of survivors are finally, sort of waking up en masse from what they went through. And it can be really confusing. It can be debilitating. And, having this information out, having people like you courageous enough to share what you went through and then what you learned and how you overcame, those are going to be the tools that are going to stand the test of time, that are going to help heal the world, and going to help survivors heal quicker. It's going to help them know that they're not alone, and every single time
Yes.
somebody speaks out, which I know that you've been doing for a little while now, it changes lives and makes such a difference. So thank you for everything that you've been doing. Your resume for the ways that you have helped this community is just extensive. It's incredible, and we've talked privately about so many other things that you're working on too to contribute that, you haven't even announced yet to people. So I just think it's wonderful and just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart too for shouldering your own story and then for also embracing so many other survivors and carrying their weight along with yours so we can help heal this community.
Yeah, and I'm so excited about how I was able to go from terror, literal terror, living in terror. It's not just fear, to being able to then start to just feel the fear and then get to the place where, like there's anxiety and then peace. And I never, ever thought I would get here. And advocating for ourselves, finding our own voice, that is so important because mind control teaches you that you don't exist and you don't have a voice and you got to keep silent. And so to connect with the parts of us that are able to rise up above all of that and break through the programming, I'll be honest, it's hard, but it's so worth it. And when I've talked at Healing Together conferences, I've made these little cards um, with this splash of pink on a black background. Of course, I love pink, so it says "Worth the fight."
Mm.
And that is like my lived theme for myself, but also for other survivors. And then on the back, I don't have one right here, but it says, I am, read like, I can't even think of, I am accepted, I am loved, I am valued, I have worth. Just, and I am a firm believer in affirming ourselves because we need to do that. But there is some programming in in all of this that says we're supposed to do everything for others, not ourselves. And so I had to fight the programming that said I have to like do all this stuff for others. But it's like the programming is in that programming is instead of ourselves. And so fighting and resisting, oh, I got to tell everybody else about this. What I've learned, it's like, no, we have to be the most important thing in our life because if we don't survive and we don't have the necessary resources, it's kind of like if you're on an airplane and the oxygen mask comes down, it's like we have to put that mask on first before we can help anybody else.
I couldn't
That's
agree
what I've
more.
found.
And I think it's a really empowering moment when somebody can go from living their entire lives to serving people who want to exploit the beautiful nature and the gifts that they have within them to saying, no, those are mine. And I'm going to use those things because God gave them to me. I'm going to use them for what He gave them to me to use for. And it's not to serve your evil agendas. It's not to be exploited, not to be used. It's to create things from my own heart and spirit that will end up helping people. But that has to come, like you said, from filling your own cup first. You have to do that first. And then you can, with everything that's spilling over, then you can start filling other people's cups and be like, do you want some? Do you want some? But it has to come from you first. And I think it's wonderful how many of you are overcoming that and taking back the things that they took from you, and you couldn't be more right about that. And so many of you too had just the most incredible and still have the most incredible spiritual gifts, just so talented on so many levels, not to mention all the things that they condition and train you for while you're going through programming, all the different skills that you all acquire and how they made you feel that all those things belong to them, that you could only use them if they let you in the way that they wanted. And it's so wonderful now that instead of feeling shame about those things, how you always used to, now it's like, no, that's mine and I'm going to use it for something good. If I was trained for this and if I have this skill and if I was born with this, different spiritual abilities that children have that some adults now can still hold on to, I'm going to use these to create beauty in the world, not to serve somebody's selfish, egotistical, psychopathic agenda. So I love that you're doing that. And that's a really wonderful lesson to share.
And it doesn't mean we can't help other survivors along the
Right.
way
Yeah.
because we can. It's just that we can't do that instead of helping our own self and learning how to advocate for ourselves. It takes time and a lot of breaking the conditioning that says we serve the cult or the traffickers or that criminal cultic group.
Absolutely. And your story has no shortage of these different layers of groups and different industries. And I mean, your story connects a lot of different dots. And I think it'll be really impactful for other people to hear, especially because you have learned so much about your family background too, which I thought maybe we could get into a little bit. I think society has this idea through Hollywood and these different ways that we learn about trafficking if we see it on TV or hear about it, that the people that commit these crimes are psychopathic, sort of maybe drugged out, weird people who wear black. They don't have their hair cut. They look like they're on drugs, and they just run out and steal a random kid and abuse them. And that's really not how it is. It doesn't look that way at all in real life, and it's a very sophisticated network of a lot of times very sophisticated people, very resourceful people, very intelligent people, and I think your family history sort of demonstrates the reality of the type of person and network that is involved with this. So do you want to share a little bit of that and sort of paint your family background and what you've learned about it?
Yeah. So like what you said is so true. Like my dad, him and I were very close. Um, but yet he sexually abused me in the home. And I had that with my mother too. And like, but they weren't these awful, evil people, and they were victims too. It, it was multi-generational. They make sure that it's passed down and through programming and conditioning and rituals. Um, like in my memories, my mom, was saying how important it is for me to pass it down. And then I was trained uh, just like she was and conditioned and programmed. And also with my dad, he was in World War II. And, of course, the depression and anxiety and stuff he went through, PTSD, you might think was just from, what he experienced in the war, but he was he and I walked to the same free clinic that our family went to, where he was exposed along with me, and this was separate from the school, where he was subjected to the same mind control projects that I was. And so it's it's like, and all of this was blocked out of my conscious memory until my father passed away. But I'm six of 10 kids that my mom and dad had, Catholic family, and they were poor. We were poor. They did the best that they could. But now that I know how this passes down and I know how sophisticated this programming is and how it's a multi-generational thing, and there's a lot of demonic um, evil behind it all that ensures, that it's hidden in secret. But then it was connected with the Catholic Church, and it was connected with the school, with the government talented and gifted program. And so then the scientists that were brought over to the United States from Germany, they were in the back of this free medical clinic where I was bused to from school. And so it when I pieced it all together after having memories for years, it's not like I remember everything, but it's so interconnected, and the network of criminals and people that did the trafficking, it's just it's frightening that it's so interconnected and like woven together in every, like, families, schools, churches, um, medical places, clinics, hospitals, universities, colleges. It's just everywhere.
You're absolutely right. And I think the other thing too, along with the way that we think traffickers and people that hurt children should look and how they act like on a movie, how that is also portrayed falsely. The other thing is kind of the stranger danger lesson that they have promoted, which is that people that do this don't know the child, they're not in close proximity to a child, they target children. And what we see a lot in stories like yours is that it's actually the people that are committing the abuse and perpetrating the abuse are the people closest to the child in the family. It's not random
Yeah.
strangers that aren't connected. It is a network right from the parents to the people that are around your parents and your communities and your schools, like you said, where they work. This is people that are outliers of the family. It's not strangers for the most part. Of course, that happens, but that's not the majority of child abuse and organized abuse that happens to a kid, trafficking, these different sophisticated abuses. It's perpetuated by people closest to the child, not strangers like how they want us to think.
Yeah. And when it's familial, it's harder to detect because it's like you, as a child, I wasn't abducted and missing and taken away from my home. I still went to school. I still went to church. I still, did the normal stuff that kids do. I was very controlled by my parents, very isolated. I wasn't allowed to do school activities and I wasn't allowed to have friends over. And there was a lot of neglect. At the age of 10, I found a lump in my groin and I went to my mother and shared with her what was going on and she was like, "Oh, it's probably nothing." And I wasn't taken to the doctor. And then I lived with that fear. I don't know for how long, but then I got up enough courage to tell her again, and because it was getting bigger. And, then her attitude again was like, "Well, it's probably nothing." And then so I had to wait till I was 19 years old to have a surgery that was for a hernia, but it was also kind of suspicious to me now that it was also combined with a hydrocele, and it was a rare type of thing that happens to boys, not girls. And so I don't know if there was something connected with the medical experimentation that was done to me, or if it was just a birth defect kind of a thing. But there was a lot of neglect and keeping me from being able to have the care that I needed. They took us to the dentist. That was something that I was given access to, but not when it came to the, like medical needs. And then this is a little bit embarrassing to say, but I've worked past it. Uh, I've discovered that I had worms. And, like I went to the bathroom and we had such a big family. The reason I discovered it, because I had to go to the bathroom behind the garage. And so then here it's like, oh no, I have worms.
Oh.
And so uh, this just tells a story of like the neglect there was because then I thought, well, my mom doesn't help me and she doesn't hear me when I go to her to tell her what's going on with me. So I went to my dad and he's like, "Oh, just eat lots of carrots. Worms don't like carrots." And so this was my life. So I had to live with the fear of that too, that, oh my gosh, there's worms eating inside of me. And I have this, I thought I had cancer.
Mhm.
Um, and, just laying in bed at night, having that fear, like, if I ever get help to go to a doctor, will I be able to handle this? Because my own parents aren't even caring about me and giving me what I need. And, then I didn't realize until an adult that I was terrified of doctors because I had medical experimentation. And that has been such a awful thing to face and having the memories of that. And my dad was involved with that every bit as much as I was in that lab in the back of the free medical clinic. And so it was just like, I feel like the family was just overcome from the evil that was touching all of us. And they weren't even just surviving. I mean, you know how you do everything just to survive. They were floundering. They weren't surviving. And I look back now, and so many times I want to see the good things that happened because it's so devastating to have to face um, the reality of my parents, like sexually abusing me and not protecting me. But someday I am going to write down all the good things that I can remember because this journey of remembering and having flashbacks and um, like just having to face what it was really like, it kind of overshadows the good stuff that did happen. And my dad, like hiding candy and Easter eggs on a Easter morning, or taking me to work with him he worked at a truck stop, and having him give me my own bottle of orange pop and a Twinkie, and my mom during holidays making cookies and um, sacrificing her own needs for the 10 kids that she was trying to raise. And I know that many times she went without food so that we could all have food. And so I think one of the hardest things is to combine all of the horror and all seeing the good. It's hard to keep a balance of both because um, and then it's like, who's responsible for this? Because if they were victims, which they were, and my dad did try to get help, um, then who did I blame? And it's like, I got to the point where it's like, well, I know Satan's behind all of this. He's the evil behind it all. That doesn't mean what they did was okay,
Hmm.
because it's like, otherwise I would like do the conditioned program thing to think more of someone else, like even my abusers, like the traffickers and all the people in the lab. It's like as they're abusing me, they're like making me feel sorry for them. Well, if I don't do this, they'll kill me. We're doing this because we're trying to find a cure for cancer. And it's like, oh, okay, then that means it's okay what you're doing to me because I have to think about other people. I have to think about you as you abuse me, and I have to think about all the many people that need a cure for cancer. So I'll just give up my life. No, none of it was okay. And even though my parents were a victim, they had choices, just like I do. And I chose to um, when my dad died and I started to thaw out, that's how I think of it because it's like I started crying and I couldn't stop crying. And I didn't even know what I was crying about other than my dad's death. But then I really truly believe that God gave me a way out to escape. And that's what's beautiful. And, I believe that God used me to like Jesus to deliver the family sins and the evil that passed down to me in my generation with me is broken. And it's like that is what I try to focus on is the now. But yet, I still deal with flashbacks. In fact, I can't remember if it was yesterday or the day before, I had some more. And it's a continuing process. But
Yeah. And you bring up a really good point. The complexities of this are also hard for people kind of on the outside looking in, learning about this to understand. I almost think I wouldn't want any of this to happen to anybody, but I almost think it'd be easier if it was a complete stranger that did something like that to a child, because then you don't have like an emotional connection to them. It's not somebody that you needed to provide for you. To have a parent or somebody so close to you that the child is dependent on it to live, it's everything. It's God to the child whenever it's a little baby, that's everything that the child knows is just those two parents. It's their world. To be betrayed and abused by those two people, there is nothing more harmful to a child, and I think the initial reaction for people is to just get so mad, grab the pitchforks, let's get them all these evil people. Sure, there's an evil side, but I love how you and others are able to bring that humanity back, where it's like we need to understand this at its root cause instead of just the symptomology with it, which is psychopathy, which is mind control, which is abuse, which is perpetration, and we need to look at it at its foundation, which is this is, grooming from birth. This is constant abuse, by people that the child loves. And then also that there are good times. Somebody who's a psychopath or who's under mind control, they're not mean 24 hours a day. It's not abuse 24 hours a day. Is it for an extended period of time, ritualistically? Yes. But so that's what's hard is like these are people that you loved and like you wanted to love so bad and wanted to love you. This is family. And so there's so many
Yes.
different like emotional dynamics that go into this where it's like we want these people to come out and want to heal like what you did. We don't want to just outcast them and look at them like they're less than human. We need to look at them like
Right.
what they are, a victim. Of course it doesn't make perpetration right. Of course people have a choice once they get to a certain age, and luckily it's so many like you now are starting to walk away, and say, I'm not going to participate in this. It stops with me. But I love that you can bring some humanity into it because that is something we need to offer compassion to people too as we're looking at these stories and say it's not right what you did, but also were they a victim? Is this somebody who maybe just was so beaten down that they didn't feel like they had a choice and they were so mind controlled and dissociative and just robotic that they completely just, any inkling of like having a consciousness just wasn't there, and if
Right.
they were to have been given a safe space where somebody would have said, all right, we want you to leave and we're going to take care of you. We're going to help you heal. So many of these people would do that in a heartbeat if they knew that there wouldn't be consequences, if they knew that there wouldn't be retaliation and targeting, and just like the hell of healing too. That can be so hard, and of course the people that consciously choose to do it need to be dealt with in a different way than the people that are victimized to it, but we have to sort of like, look at this on different levels and tiers and, have compassion for the entire situation instead of, I think an initial reaction is just to get so angry and hateful. But it's
Yeah.
like it's just sad that so many people like your parents, they're born into it, they die through it, and they never experience the freedom that you did for even a day. I mean, like how heartbreaking
Yeah.
is that to like think about how many people like never get to like truly be in love, never get to like make a choice by themselves or feel
Mhm.
how good healing feels and just like living life, and it's like it's really devastating. It's like one of the saddest things in the whole world what these people go through, and how many aren't courageous enough like you to take that step to leave.
Yeah, and what you said about strangers, like it would be easier if it was a stranger and you're abducted and like you get the help or, like then you can think, oh, this is a bad guy, and they abducted this girl, meaning me. But when it's family, it's like you come home from school and your abusers are your family and they're not mean 24/7. They might be neglectful. They might have their own issues that they're surviving because of, what's been done to them. But it's so um I don't even know the word. It's like there's so much love and attachment that you have to have as a child, and they target that, the mind control and ritual abuse people do. But it's passed down from generation to generation, and they don't even know that what has happened to them until something triggers them, and maybe they have resources and support to be able to start feeling safe enough, like I was given, to have that journey of finding, help. And it's like we're not supposed to ever seek help outside of the cult. We're not supposed to ever, break that silence. And there's all these threats of what will happen if you do,
Right.
and being shown this will happen to you. And that happened in my family. Like, um, there was suspicious circumstances surrounding my dad's death in 1984. And he supposedly fell down a flight of stairs at my sister's consignment shop, and he did the bookwork and accounting for her. And so he was taken to the local hospital in Manchester, Iowa. And then because of the need for better care and they couldn't handle his injuries, he was taken to the Dubuque, Iowa hospital, and doctors there said they couldn't understand how somebody could get hurt that bad from falling down carpeted steps. and they never found his hat. And he always wore his hat. And the doctors said that his hat would show if there was like some blunt force because the injuries he sustained were that of not just falling down steps. And he was in the hospital. I was able to visit him. And when I was in the hospital, I didn't know why I had this thought at the time, but I had this thought. I thought we never had to die physically. And it was like, where the heck did that come from? Well, years later, um, when I had the memories, I knew where that came from, because of the rituals and the mind control and just all of the um, brainwashing and the things that were suggested to me that were lies. There was the belief that if we do all these things in this cultic group, um, we are somehow like keeping all of the generations that went before us alive and having eternal life, physically even, and that if we meet in these and do these rituals in parks and cemeteries and church basements and wherever we would meet in forests even, um, that somehow we were keeping everyone alive that had already died, which is a mind-blowing thought when you really think about it, and then everybody that is going to be to come. And it's so important to pass it down, or not only do we die, but the people that have already died, which it's just insane when you can logically think it all through. But as a child, you're just in it and you believe it, and so do your parents. And I never knew my dad's parents, so his parents had died before I was even born. But I need to write something down so I don't forget. But my dad's dad, the grandfather I never met, he was in World War One. And so my dad, when he was 16 years old, he had to watch his dad, who had had mustard gas exposure from World War One. He had to watch him like die, like coughing up his lungs and having, just horrible things. And I really don't know much, about him other than he was in the military. But I suspect that this passed down, like from even maybe before him. That's just the way this works. And I know nothing about my dad's mother, but my mom's parents were also Catholic, and I suspect that my grandpa, my mother's father, was in Freemasonry because when he died, my grandmother wanted to give me a red ruby ring. And I have since, and then she took it back. I don't, I don't know what that was all about, but she wanted to give it to me, of all people. And my middle name, my given name is Sharon Ann Rose, and my last name was Potter. But I know that there was something about me being given that name Rose, because my mom always told me when she dies, she's going to give me all the things that have to do with roses, that she had in her home. And rose in ritual abuse and mind control has a meaning, and it means death. And it also is like a code for passing things down. And, like a reminder that if you don't, everybody's going to die. And so I, s- I, re- I don't have proof that my grandpa was a Freemason, but there's just a suspicion that, whatever he was in, whether it was a fraternal organization or um, the generational stuff that, obviously passed down from both my mother's parents, my grandparents, and my mom's mom was so mean. She was just like I never saw her kind or loving, But yet when she got dementia and she went to a nursing home, she became like a little kid. And I even shared a doll with her, that I had for my kids in the car. And she just became a different person after my grandpa died. It was just like she became like a little girl. And I really believe that she never got to be a little girl. And um, I've heard people say that one of the reasons people get dementia is because they don't deal with the trauma in their family and in their life. And it makes sense because then all of a sudden you just become a child, like a child, or, um, you know, the, there's so much I could talk about because I'm just discovering also some things about, um, like how our minds are targeted with the medical experimentation and just the broca and left hemisphere of the brain um, and the frontal cortex, all the thinking part of our brain, and the language center, and that maybe could be talked about in the future. But as far as my grandparents, that's pretty much like all I know about them. But when I think of my father's death, going back to that, um, in the years that I've had memories, um, the the town I was leaving was Manchester, Iowa, and that's where my father had this accident. Only I don't think it was an accident. Um, I started crying. I know now that I felt safe enough because my dad was no longer around. Not that I wanted him dead, but he did. That death was what God used to help me to start thawing out and waking up and remembering things. And I started to deal with some physical abuse that was a one-time incident directly from him. And then um, later years, much later years, I remembered being given my dad's hat in a box and being told that if I ever tell, I'm going to be framed for his murder. Now, was he murdered, or were they just using his death to make me believe that, or just use it as a threat? I really don't know. But I suspect that he really was murdered because I saw him trying to get out of what he didn't know he was in. He was going to a psychiatrist, traveling an hour away to get help, and was attending support groups. He was getting medication, and I saw parts of him where he went amnesic and he didn't know he was the age he was. He thought he was just getting out of World War II, and he didn't know who I was or who he knew who he was married to, my mom. But, there was just all these things that happened. And so in later memories, when I was leaving that area, Manchester, Iowa, um, I had met this man who's my husband now of 31, almost 32 years. His name is Frank. And because I was breaking free, um, I have memories where in a Walmart parking lot, I thought it was Frank behind me. We weren't married yet, and I didn't have a divorce yet, but um, I thought it was him behind me. And it was the police saying that they had Frank and that I needed to come with them. And I thought, well, is he in trouble? What do I need to do here? So I went with them. And this was not something I consciously knew was happening. It was when I was recalling and having memories and flashbacks. But the chief of police, Bruce Trapp, he and other people in this cultic group that I believe had something to do with my father's death, they took me into like a jail, and they raped me and tortured me, re-accessed me, and tried to reprogram me. But what they did during that time was to remind me of how I would be framed for my dad's murder. But now they added to that and they said that I was trading my life for Frank's in exchange for my silence. And so I carried that with me for so many years, being so afraid that Frank was going to die. Not, we got married and not knowing why I was having that terror and fear. And when I discovered what had happened to cause me to have that fear, I became so much more empowered. Like I knew it inside of me. Parts of me knew, but I didn't have the conscious awareness of what I truly got out of and got away from. And Frank, the husband that I have now, I truly believe that he was put in my life by God. Um, and I was going through a divorce. Well, he was the reason I was able to get strong enough to start the divorce proceedings. And he was the first man that ever showed me love. And he was so amazingly God sent because not once did he ever ask for sex. He asked if he could hold my hand. He asked if he could kiss me. And we were friends. He became like my best friend. And because of the support, yeah, right? Because of the support that I've had from him all these years, he's a big reason why I was able to remember and survive getting away from them. But it didn't come without a cost. Um, During the divorce, my mother and my brother testified against me. I lost custody of my children for 2 years, my three children, and they lived with their father, who that's a whole nother thing. He was he wasn't physically abusive to me, but he was always angry. The only reason I married him is because I got pregnant, and he um, he just kept the cycle of abuse going where I just felt like I was worthless, that my life didn't matter, and that there was no, I just pretty much gave up my life. But I really believed that in getting a divorce, I could get me and my three children away from him. And my father had already passed away. So then when I started the divorce proceedings, my ex-husband and my mother, they started like this campaign, which I didn't understand at the time. I thought it was just because we're Catholic, so you don't get a divorce. Because they even would say things like, well, if he was the one getting the divorce, we'd be there for you. And right, I don't believe that now. Um, but because the one tool that this group and my family could use was taking my children to keep me in it. I truly believe that's what happened because my mother and my brother testified against me in the courtroom, saying I was a bad mother, saying that he would be the better parent, and he did not know how to be a parent. I was a single mom. I truly was. And I was able to get stronger, though, to be able to leave him. So that was the good thing. It was amazing that I was going to support groups, not for the abuse, but for, like some things that were going on at work. I was such a good people pleaser, and my people pleasing wasn't working with this one woman at work. And I went to this therapist, and said she gave me permission to say no to people, and that was a huge thing, like so then I got bolder. Somebody gave me permission to say no and to not have to put up with just anything that people brought my way, and I got so bold, and I never looked back. When I made that decision to leave him, it was just like he started stalking me at work, and I had to get a restraining order against him. But he came into the retail store that I was working in. And so I told him to leave me alone. And I said, I have a restraining order against you and you need to leave now. And I went into my office and there wasn't anybody in there to help me at the time. But I grabbed the phone and I said, if you don't leave right now, I'm going to call the police. And he really didn't believe that I was going to do that because he had beat me down even more. And it was a moment I will never forget. And he paid me the biggest compliment that anyone could ever pay me. He said, when he saw that, he looked and saw the police actually coming behind him. He said, "You've got balls." And it was like, yes, I do. And another time, like when you go through mediation with a divorce with a court person, I was like, okay, if we're going to do this, I need to do this in a public place because I have a restraining order against this guy. So we met at a Hardee's, and afterwards, it was a joke. It was just like, there's no mediating with this marriage. But anyway, I left Hardee's and I went into the parking lot to get into my car. And who's following me? Him. And I'm like, I'm not going to let that stop me. So I got in my car, and before I got in, I said, um, I'm going to the police. And so I drove to the police station, and he came right in behind me, just like, what? He doesn't have to follow the court order, the restraining order. And so the chief of police and well, he didn't come out first, but the receptionist, dispatcher, whatever you call them, she looked at me and I said, I have a restraining order against him and he's following me. Can you do something, please? And so she got the police and it was the chief of police and he was so nice. He didn't say, "Oh, you're under arrest," or, "We're going to press charges against you," or anything. It was just like, "Oh, could you please leave?" And I'm like, and they didn't ask me if I was okay. They didn't do anything for me. It
Is
was
that the
just like,
same chief of police that you found out abused you? Yeah. Oh my gosh.
yeah, yeah. But I got away from him, even though I lost my three children for 2 years, which I thought I was going to die
Oh,
when that happened. But I felt like I didn't have anything to live for back there anymore. And so, uh, let's see, that my divorce was finalized in 1990, and I think I moved. I can't remember when I moved away, but I went to live with Frank, and we got married and everything. But I did end up getting my children back. But I believe that God used everything that happened, like Frank being in my life, me already having some support and therapy, um, just finding out, because I was working for 7 years, I think, finding out that, people did like me and there wasn't just what I had found in my life, as um, and I could make some of my own decisions. And that was a big part of breaking away. But I didn't escape, like, oh, a hide. I know what's happening. It was like I felt like I was given a chance to have a way to escape. And not that I wanted to lose my children. And my whole family turned their back on me. And it was a good thing because if I would have stayed in that area and if those things wouldn't have happened, would I have gotten out? I don't know, but I did. And
which
God
is
made a
such a
way.
miracle. Yes, he did. And I love that your story has a happy ending. Your husband seems like an absolute angel. And I love that how you still light up so much whenever you talk about him. And it's very sweet. It's wonderful that you had that support. My heart breaks for all these survivors that, they get out and everybody abandons them and they don't have, a safe person. A lot of the spouses that they have are probably like your ex-husband, somebody that may have been orchestrated to be in your life, somebody who's not a very good person, and then those people also turn their backs on them. And it's so common too that survivors get their children taken away. You see all the different ways that they use children as these little carrots to dangle in front of whoever. Children are
Mhm.
are the kind of commodity that they just look at like a product almost. You're not even a
Yes.
human in a lot of ways, and I think your story too, some of the things that you brought up, like how young you were whenever, some of these things happened to you. And, you
Yes.
look at the the way that regular society is going, once again to sort of these misconceptions, a lot of survivors get asked, well, why did you stay so long? Why didn't you leave
Right.
earlier? Well, for one, your memories are fragmented, but for two, this doesn't just happen suddenly when somebody's like 18 years old and all of a sudden, they're under this control and they have a controlling parent. This is like from the day that you're born, they have a plan already set for you on how they're going to basically capture your mind, and not give you the chance to have free thought, to say no, to have a boundary, to think about you learning those things much later in life as an adult that, oh, I can say no. Like that's something a child says no a million times, that aren't in these
Yes.
systems. That's like a word a child will say a ton of times whenever they can learn to talk. And, they shut off your ability to do that so young. So
Mhm.
you have to be always that, I'm going to serve you. I'm going to serve you. They really like groom you for that from the time that you're little. So that becomes normal. That's just like the
Yeah.
way that life is. It's not something that you look at as being strange necessarily. It's just, this is what I do, So
Right.
I wanted to ask you, what is kind of your story with the abuse side? How young did that start for you? And was that your parents that started that, or were there other perpetrators whenever you were very young?
I think my abuse possibly started in utero. I
Mm.
have had like some flashes of different things. Um, my memories of my dad sexually abusing me was around the age of 2, and my mom found him with me. Um, he worked at nights at the time, and so he was sleeping during the day. And my mom found him with me, blamed me, and threw me down the steps. And then I had to have stitches. I still have like the scar from because I had like this little tin wind-up duck, and it I had it in my mouth because I was scared and I felt like I needed something. And she always told me that I fell down the steps with a spoon in my mouth. And but as far as my mom, I don't know what age she started to do this, but some of the bizarre rituals that she was putting me through that included sexual abuse was before I went to school. I do know that. And so she would wake me up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and um, she would come to me while I was still in bed and she would tell me that she was dying. And this happened like so frequently that it was just a part of my mornings. And then she would abuse me. And then she would act like I did the stuff to her. And it's like she became like this little girl. And then, like there was such a blurring of who is who. And as if I was the adult abusing my own mother. And she was grooming me and teaching me how to please men, which later was used in the trafficking. But then the nightly ritual that she would do was like I would be put to bed at 8 o'clock at night. And these times are so cemented in my brain because it was conditioned. And so at about 10 o'clock every night, I would be waking up to my mom putting me in a bathtub of water and causing me to feel like I'm dying and I'm drowning. So, like in the morning, she's telling me she's dying, and then at night, she's making me believe that I'm dying. And it was like a ritual to condition me so that when I became an adult, I would do the same things with my children, was the plan. And so, um, when she would, um, have the bathtub water go down the drain. This was to teach me that I was going down the drain and that I didn't exist anymore because I died, and that it wouldn't matter what anybody did to me because those parts of me that were subjected to this would then believe, well, we're gone. I mean, we're dead. So what difference does it make what anybody does to us anymore? But she did the same thing with toileting and washing hands. It's like when I would get up at night, and she would do this during the day to teach me that when I would get up to, or go to the bathroom, what I was doing was actually my urine or feces, like depending on if you pee or poop, it's like what would happen then is when I would flush the toilet, that was me going down the drain. It was just like a reminder, and how often do you go to the bathroom? I mean, a lot. And so every time I would go to the bathroom, there would be these parts that would be activated with the conditioning that it's like, okay, we're gone, we're not alive. And same thing with washing hands. And I know that a lot of survivors have hand washing and they don't always realize that there's some stuff behind all of that. And so the belief then is that every time you wash your hands, or have anything to do with running water, like at the faucet, whether it's the sink or the kitchen, it's like you're going down the drain and you're also like it's like a conditioned thing to then believe that nothing has happened, you haven't been abused, and all of these things are just washed away. I mean, it's a twofold thing. And so then that meant that when I became an adult, I was conditioned to do the same things. And so by breaking free and getting away, and um, so that interrupts that um, passing it down, and that interrupts the stuff that you're supposed to do to your own children. But it's like when I was trafficked, the way that this ritual stuff was used, but that my mother did, was that at 10 o'clock I would wake up and it was already arranged that I would be trafficked that night. Like when they started to use me, and I think they started to use me around the age of 5, um, which is horrible because they want the youngest that they can get, um, these traffickers. So I would wake up, and what is so weird, Emma, and I've I identified this with the adult parts of me that could think logically through everything and connecting with all the different parts that, and they use many, like there's a part that wakes up, there's a part that goes into the bathroom, there's a part that takes me out the door, there's a part then that switches to go into the car that the traffickers are picking me up with, and then there's a part that has to look forward and not look at the person that's picked me up and just look straight forward and not say anything and just go where I'm being taken. And um, so it's like the 10 o'clock was very significant for trafficking because then I would be taken somewhere and no part of me that went out the door even knew what the other parts were doing in the hotel room and being trafficked. And um, the 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 stuff that happened at school with the priest and the nun, that was also connected, because here I'm in school and I'm being sexually abused by a priest and a nun and also being groomed for trafficking. And they were connected to this criminal cultic group. And so were the people at the doctor, my childhood doctor, at the free medical clinic that my family went to. And then they were connected to um, the mind control projects that were happening that I was bused to from school. So it was so insanely, sophisticatedly connected. And to have in my mind as an adult to try to piece everything together. It's not like I remembered everything and it's like, oh, I know what happened to me. It came in bits and pieces, and it is like I can remember like remembering, and it's like, there's no way this could have happened. I must be crazy. That's conditioned. So is denial, and walling off of the different parts. But um, I do know that what was being done at home was also for the cult and the trafficking. What was being done at church, in school, was all connected. And the mind control projects, um, that's a whole nother thing that, um, I mean, I had medical experimentation. I had, like where they are doing torture and electric shock and
And
just,
this was through the gifted and talented program, right? Is where you were funneled off for the mind control specifically.
yeah, the talented and gifted program. Um, some part of me pieced something together that the government gave schools Bluebird buses in exchange for kids. And I was one of those kids. And so somehow that's connected, the government program for talented and gifted. And that doesn't mean that all talented and gifted programs are like this. But it was in my case. And so I and other kids from school, not all of them, because that would be too suspicious, were bused to the back of this free clinic where these German Nazi scientists, doctors were doing a mind control project, which included, like supposedly finding that cure for cancer, which was never the truth. But, there was a lot of kids there. There was, and that time period, the times that I was brought there from school, those times that I was there with my dad was separate from the school stuff. So there was like a duality going on. Like anybody that went to that free clinic was also being funneled into this mind control project. Not everyone, I wouldn't be able to say that and be accurate, but that's also how people were being uh, taken into these projects.
What types of experiments, like what were they trying to accomplish at this medical clinic? What things were they testing for or trying to further research for? You mentioned cancer, which, I've heard that a lot in these stories where that's what they tell children is that you're helping contribute to AIDS or to this virus or to this condition, and it's basically like they're pumping them full of medicine and sort of, doing medical experimentation on them. So it can be confusing to come out of that and be like, was it really research for this or were they doing something else?
Right.
But what did you have you figured out at all what were they trying to accomplish or what was the result they were trying to get from these experiments?
It doesn't bother me to talk about these things anymore because I've connected the dots of what happened, but also connected with the parts of me that knew what happened to me. So I had memories of, um, this isn't hard for me to talk about, but it might be hard for other people to hear. So I'll be careful with how I say this. I have memories of having these supposed scientists, supposed doctors. They did wear lab coats, like a doctor, and they did have a lab that they created that looked like a regular research lab. But I know it wasn't. It was just an excuse to do what they were doing to little children. But I have connected with parts of me that these people actually drilled into my skull while I was awake, and they were. um, they gave me drugs, and I remember very specifically be put on a metal table. I do not know why they use metal tables, but they do. It's very common. I saw myself and others being put on these metal tables. And so, for one thing, it's cold, and you're just exposed because your clothes are all taken off. And why would you need to have all your clothes taken off to have medical experimentation and for research? It doesn't make any sense. But they not only drilled in the top of my skull, but they also drilled up the roof of my mouth and up through my nose. And some of what they were doing, I don't know why they were doing it, but some of what they did was to actually, I don't know if they did this with the drugging that they did, so I felt like I was paralyzed and I couldn't move, or if what they were doing to my brain was causing this. I don't know. But so they would say things to me while they're doing this. Well, move your right hand, move your toes. And I couldn't move my toes. And so then, because I couldn't move, then they would give me electric shock to punish me because I didn't do what I was told. And so they did, I do remember them also trying to access the left brain only and try to remove every single part of me on the right side of the brain to only have left brain thinking. And the reason I say that is because they were trying to target any part of me that could be creative. And that's how they use this name, talented and gifted, because in another room, I know I'm getting off of the medical experimentation and the torture and stuff, but in another room before they started to do the medical stuff, it's not even medical. It's terrorists of the mind and body is what they're doing. Um, so in another room, they're encouraging creativity, like letting me dance on a stage, letting me sing, and all these other kids get to do this too. And, like we're looked at as celebrities and we're going to be famous someday and just all of this bull. But as a kid, you believe it. I believed it. And so then, we're treated like these amazing kids, that are so special and talented and gifted and all this. And then the next thing I know, um, I'm having all this stuff done to me in this created, man-made German lab. It was nothing that the United States was. The, the United States was um, they allowed these people to come into the United States, but it was not like a clinic that any of us could go to. It was just created for uh, exploiting children. And so here I am on this metal table, and this was done over and over again. It wasn't a one-time incident, but I was just looking at um, a CT scan of my skull that I had had in 2017 because I was having some sinus problems. And I was up early this morning doing some research and looking at this CT scan in front of my eyes on my computer. And what they found on this CT scan at the time, they said, well, I encourage you to get some neurological workups to follow through with this. But when I mentioned that I had had severe trauma, then the ENT doctor was like, oh, okay, that explains it. So anyway, what is on my CT scan report is there are extensive calcifications along the anterior falx, FALX, and they call it hyperostosis frontalis, which is otherwise known as HFI. Um, and I was doing some research. I really believe the parts of me that remember what happened, because I know um, how hidden this stuff is, and when you hear other survivors say similar things, you just know it. I just know it's true. Anyway, this is an uncommon condition, and it's characterized by excess bone growth with multiple nodules, mostly on the inner table of the frontal bone. And it is a rare condition. Usually they find it, unless you're having headaches and other things, they find it just randomly. And when it gets severe enough, there's significant compression of the meninges that can lead to compromise in blood supply and neural tissues. And this is where it gets interesting. In the frontal lobe, including the Broca's area, which is what they targeted, and the premotor cortex, and the prefrontal is associated. That cortex is associated with cognition and memory. And so I believe that my mind was being targeted just like other survivors in these mind control experiments. And what's interesting is that I was reading how there's that fold of dura matter that separates the two hemispheres of the brain, the cerebral hemispheres. And I have parts that have remembered and let me know that that's is what was happening. They were trying to alter the different hemispheres of the brain and the way that the brain fires so that they controlled how I would think. They controlled how and what I would do and how and what I would not do. So the parts of my brain that were parts of me, because I mean, I'm just one person. I'm not multiple people. But those parts of me that were right brain were not allowed to ever come out. No creativity, no use of my own um, God-given abilities. They targeted the gifts and the talents that God put in me so that I would not use them, hopefully ever, in their if they had their way. But God is greater, and I am able to use my creativity, but not without extensive years of, like breaking through that conditioning and like making new neural pathways in my own mind. And there are times, Emma, when during the time I was connecting with the memories and the parts of me in my brain, I actually felt my brain sapping and rewiring and changing to the other side of my brain. I literally felt it. I literally heard it inside of my head. And unfortunately, the things that they do through all of this work, it kept me enslaved for most of my adult life, other than getting away in like around 1990 is when I really started escaping all of this. But, our brains don't know that it's safe. And the way that our brains work, even if we do get away, the way our brains work, it's like that brain is still on survival mode, 911, red alert, like always, thinking there's danger. And the conditioning and the programming that's suggested during the torture and during the electric shock, and it's so effective um, because I was controlled. I was a slave. I was used for child pornography and child sex trafficking. And it's like you have no choice. as a child or a teen. And it is different than the trafficking. All of this is different than, like, I have a survivor that shared her story with me, and she had been sexually abused by a person in the family, but it didn't include ritual abuse and all of that, or SRA. But then in college, she was literally abducted by a boyfriend and who held her at gunpoint from that point on to just do whatever he said. And he used the threat of that he would harm her family. And thank God she got away. But that, not to diminish in any way at all, um, the people that are trafficked that way or abducted. But there's a difference because in that case, the difference is this. They haven't had all of the programming and conditioning that tells them they just have to do whatever they're told. And yes, it's so horrible that, any of that happens at all. And it's hard to get away from those kind of traffickers too. Um, but I always want to leave people with hope and, like, so saying all this stuff about what was done to my mind, the hope is this. God created our minds. They're ours. And when we can connect with our own mind and our own emotions and our own parts of our brain that were horrifically, um, I think of terrorists of the mind, that attack the mind and the emotions and the self that we have that was given to us by God. Um, God created our brains to be able to dissociate and have, even though it's purposefully engineered with ritual abuse and mind control, um, He created our minds to be able to do that in the first place for survival. And he also created our minds to be resilient and to be able to heal and to be able to go back to the way he created us. Yes, I'll never be the way I was before this, but God has helped me to reclaim my mind, my emotions, my body, my soul, and his spirit lives in me. And what Satan and all of these people meant for evil and harm, God did mean for good. Um, and He has given me a new life, different than before. I still deal with the effects every single day. Um, I'm sure I always will, but it has been so worth it. My life, anyone else out there, your life is worth the fight that it takes to get your mind back and to reclaim your emotions and to take your body back and your power back that was never supposed to be used in these ways against, it's like having an internal enemy against our own mind because they set up these conflicts and walls in between the parts of our brains, and they rewire our brains and they disconnect our emotions from us. They disconnect us from our body. And we're never supposed to look within. We're always supposed to just look out here and comply and be subservient to them. But I kept pushing through that conditioning that said, don't do this, it's dangerous. Somebody's gonna die, we're gonna die. It's like we didn't die. We gained back our life. And oh, it's exciting. There's so much hope in all of it. And I am just like in awe of what God has done in my life and what I've seen him do in others too. I am just in awe of the fact that survivors are talking. They're, it seems like they're waking up earlier, and there's a huge movement of, survivors, kind of like back when I started that nonprofit, Survivors Helping Others Unite Together. that movement, I didn't realize started back then, but then there was the satanic panic and the false memory syndrome and all of that, and it really like shut people down. But, look what you're doing here, Emma, with all these survivors and people like you, people like Relentless Hope, um, people like Goel, who's got a Substack, investigations in ritual abuse, people like Jason and Alexia Preston with We Are the People podcast. There's a lot of neat stuff happening in Utah where survivors are speaking out. And there's people like these other people that aren't survivors, and just like you, Emma, like here you are answering that call or mission in your life, and you and all these other people are offering platforms for us to speak and tell our truth. And we are stronger together. We are mighty, even in our own self. When we know who we are, when we know, um, that those things were never okay to happen to us and it's not our fault. And, we couldn't have done anything different, and that we forgive ourselves, and then can find life, apart from them. Um, it's just like, wow.
It's amazing. And when we share testimonies like what you are, as hard as it is to talk about these things and to hear them, they're so common. There's nothing new under the sun, like we said. And if memories are false, according to the False Memory Syndrome Foundation, how damn ironic that all these survivors from all over the world who don't know each other, all their false memories are exactly the same. They all involve
Yeah.
experimentation, these horrific rituals, intergenerational, multi-generational abuse, incest, all these different things. So why wouldn't the memories be something different? Why wouldn't some people have really happy memories that they're suddenly remembering, or memories of just something totally different? It's all the same. And, I really appreciate you as well sharing about the gifted, talented program aspect, because that was surprising to me to learn how common that is. When I went to school, and I didn't have that at my school, but we had like advanced classes, I guess, where some kids like went into like these more advanced classes. But you look at that like it's an honor, like it's a prestigious thing. Parents are proud of their kids for being overachievers and being recognized for high IQs. And those are like the smart, like nerdy kids, not a thought goes through people's heads that aren't involved with the abusive side of this, that there could be anything bad about this, because they paint it to
Ah,
be just this amazing thing. And like you said, not all programs that exist for accelerated kids or smarter kids are bad. But I
right.
found it's very common in many countries where these kids that were multi-generational trafficking and organized abuse victims that were passed down were split off from the rest of the school and put into classes that they would call gifted and talented. Some kids would, there would be other kids in the actual class. So there were kids that were just doing, higher thinking activities and, games. And there was like that type of gifted and talented. But then there were these other factions where they'd take smaller groups of kids out, take them off the school property, or have a separate room for just those kids, and they would just do these heinous experiments on them. And so you see again how like inverted this stuff is, that there's the perception that they give the public about something like that, because that's not hidden. Like everybody in, all
Right.
over America knows about gifted and talented programs, or whatever they're called now. The name's always changing, but
Yeah.
everybody has heard of that. And they look at those kids, in a certain way. Wow, that's cool that you were in that, the gifted program. You must have been really smart, but when you hear about sort of the other side of it, that a lot of times these were children that were recognized through their abusive families as being, I've heard of children being experimented on for their psychic abilities and spiritual gifts,
Mhm.
for Stargate programs, the remote viewing, those were sort of all as well tied into these like special programs. And so it's just really, it's scary how well this stuff hides, whether in a
It
church, whether in
is.
a school, at a medical clinic. A lot of it is right in front of our faces, places that we're driving by, places that our children go. these things are happening there. And again, it doesn't mean every program or every child that goes to those schools or is in those institutions is being abused or involved with this. But
Right.
I think about,
Exactly.
going to school and I'm like, I wonder if I went to school with any kids who were going through what you did. And I sat next to them in class. I played with them on the playground. I did a school play with them. I played an instrument in the same class with them and like had no idea what was happening to them behind the scenes, what they were going home to, or maybe being taken out of class for, maybe. So stories like yours, I think it's validating because there's like the societal perception of these are really great programs that we have for kids. And that can be really isolating if one
Yeah.
survivor is waking up and saying, but wait, I think I was abused in that class. And everybody else is like, no, that's not, you're crazy. Like those classes are for advanced learning. What are you talking about? You must have a false memory. So it's also so validating. The more we talk about these hard things, the more it puts survivors at ease of like, oh, me too. I'm not alone. Thank goodness, thank goodness that I'm not alone, that this is a thing that they have done where they've snuck into schools in this way and then made it seem really
Yes.
good. But behind the
Right.
scenes, they're doing these really bad things to select children.
Hmm. And yeah, like we both have said, it's not all bad because there are some accelerated learning programs that are wonderful. But,
Yeah.
parents just automatically trust the schools or the churches, that their kids are doing what they're saying, the notes they get home, take home from school, that they're just doing these awesome, wonderful things. And for survivors like me and others. That's not always the case. And it's documented, that our government brought over like 1,600 Nazi scientists through Operation Paperclip and, went through the same things that I've described. And, they had the declassified CIA documents available, and then there was the church committee. And, if they can acknowledge like I think of things like Agent Orange, and like my husband's a Vietnam veteran, and he was subjected to that, but he doesn't have the effects like some people do, because he was only exposed to it, as far as he knows, once. But if our government can acknowledge that and compensate veterans, I think of this recently, like why can't they acknowledge what their own documented programs did to children, like me and others. And, like I think of the debt that I've gone in because of, like so many years of therapy and inpatient and, trying all these different medications and uh, the re-traumatization that there is not only for me but for others when they go to a psych ward, for example, where then there can be like reaccessing and having more things done to us, which I have had, and then you have to try to recover from that and like pay for medical bills. And I've had so many medical issues, and I have severe scoliosis of the spine. I've had two low back surgeries. I went to Florida and had laser spine surgery, which it helped for about a year. And now, I'm really struggling with that again. And after being trafficked, and the devastation that there is with financially. Um, we actually, I would like it, and I am going to activate or act. I'm an advocate for survivors, but I'm just starting to get into being an activist for survivors to have acknowledgement and compensation. And recently, with what's going on in Utah, I've connected with Cindy at Relentless Hope and Casey, don't want to forget her, and Jason and Alexia Preston of We Are the People podcast. And they've connected together. They're doing rallies, they're having fundraisers and stuff for Relentless Hope, which I highly recommend that organization. I've been with them for about a year, and I just recently started doing uh, some volunteer stuff for Relentless Hope with a st monthly support group. It's twice a month, and bringing speakers to bring topics to the survivors. But in connecting with these people from Utah this year, um, okay, so Jason and Alexia are facing a civil suit because they have had survivors speak on their podcast, and also Goel, who is from Investigations in Ritual Abuse, for talking. Okay, so Jason and Alexia have a civil suit against them for talking and having survivors talk on their podcast, right? And so then Goel, he's got a stalking injunction against him for talking about people, not stalking them, like going to them and harassing them and all that. But so here's these people that are being criminalized for talking and having survivors on their podcasts. And so it's like what's going on is similar to what happens when sometimes when we talk, not to scare anybody off from talking as a survivor, because I'm living proof that I'm still here and I've been talking. But anyway, Dr. Kirk Moore, I want to bring this out here too. Dr. Kirk Moore is a plastic surgeon from Utah, and recently he had to face, he was going to have to face 35 years in prison, and I don't remember how much the fines were, but it was going to go to court, and the Department of Justice was hell-bent, and I believe that's where the source is coming from, hell-bent on prosecuting him for treating those patients that he did this for free, for treating patients with ivermectin, and then I can't remember the medication that actually helps cure COVID. And then there was even a woman that if she wouldn't have gotten a vaccine, she wouldn't have been able to get uh, uh, I don't remember what the transplant was, but she would have been taken off the waiting list for getting an organ transplant. So Dr. Moore he opened a vaccine clinic, and he was treating people in keeping with his oath to do no harm, right? And really caring for patients for free. And because he didn't use the vaccines that he was given, and he was, which the inner insert of the vaccines were blank, didn't have the usual information on them. But so here's this guy, and according to the government, it looks like he's doing fraudulent things because he's going against what the protocol is, and treating patients. And so Jason was instrumental in doing a rally and getting people a press conference together and getting people fired up to speak out and really stand up for this doctor. And Dr. Moore has a son. I think he's 19 years old. I think his name is Michael. But when Dr. Moore texted the other person that was going to be charged the night before a court hearing, he was actually arrested for talking to somebody by text. And he was put in jail for 22 days. And I think it was 2019, Dr. Moore's wife passed away. So here's their son having to watch his dad be taken away in handcuffs as if he's a criminal, just for doing the right things and going against the main medical protocol. And so I just learned this year that we can appeal to the higher courts of heaven. And so I went in prayer with the encouragement of I have a prayer warrior friend, and she told me what to do and how to do it. She's so you go before the courts of heaven and ask the courts of heaven, how do you see this case, and I brought the charges that were against him and said, this is what's going on here on earth. What does heaven have to say about this? And I asked God to bring that verdict down to earth. Now, was this case dismissed because of me? No. There were all these people that were speaking out and praying and rallying together and not just putting up with this stuff. And Pamela Bondi dismissed his case. That is a miracle. But I've been in contact with Jason and really encouraging him and praying with him because he's facing a civil suit. And then same thing with Goel. I haven't been praying with him, but I've been praying for them. And I truly am excited and anxious to see what God does in those two, because I truly believe that God has called like this army of survivors and people to stand with us. And it's so exciting because he's making the way uh, for this to happen. And people are called, even like you, that you're not necessarily a survivor of ritual abuse and mind control, but you're a big part of this. So thank you.
It's an honor. I don't know how people can hear even a shred of this and not feel compelled to do something. I try to think about, I believe survivors, but I know a lot of people are still on the edge of what their mind will allow them to believe. But in my opinion, even if 1% of what all of you say is true, we should be in the streets fighting for you guys. Absolutely, like going all out. Like even if 1% of this is true. So for me, it's like, how are we not upset with this? People got in the streets because of COVID, because of elections. There's all these things because of race, people's skin color. People get in the streets for everything except for the children, except for survivors.
Yes.
Even veterans, people, like you said, they're acknowledged as somebody, a demographic of people that need extra care, that they need money every month to help sustain treatment, to help sustain life, to be able to survive. But yet with survivors, the first thing that people always say is that they don't believe you or show proof, and it's like, how horrible that, you go through everything that you do, you have all these horrific memories that you're trying to cope with, heal from, and then eventually, if somebody ends up being in a position like you where they can finally speak out, and then all of a sudden it's like, no, and the other problem is a lot of these people that you talk about are or were prominent members of society. These are people that were in lab coats, in suits. They had businesses. They were smart people. They were resourceful people. They went to church. So when you share too, like who's doing this, people want to say, oh my gosh, it's so horrible that kids are being abused, but I don't believe you because that person was nice to me. That's a good person. I know that person from work, or I've seen that person, or I know that politician I voted for, so they can't be abusive. And it's just so wild how, we gaslight these things and as a society, and we don't get enraged and like stand by you and help fight for you to get resourced. It's the least that you guys could do is to have some type of, financial backing or support acknowledgement. This is proven on many fronts that MK Ultra, that mind control projects existed. I think the missing link is, even with all the documentation that's out, even the documentation, there was a bunch that came out in December, I think Christmas Eve of last year, documentation on MK Ultra. They tend to stop right before they get to the part where children were involved. They talk
Yes.
about the experiments, but talk about how consenting adults were taken advantage of. These were adults that signed and they signed a waiver to go into these experiments, but they were taken advantage of. They didn't know that they were going to be drugged and they had all these things done. And so people feel bad, but I think people also think, well, these were adults, they were responsible, like they were taken care of. These were people that, I feel really bad for. But when you think about that was one aspect of it, but then you look at all the children that they ended up bringing in and still do. And that part they have not admitted to on many
Mhm.
levels. There were the radiation experiments, testimonies that happened in 1995, the ACHRE. testimonies that went before Congress, but that was mostly focused on radiation, even though they had mentioned
Right.
mind control, but it's just not acknowledged that these are children that are being enslaved. And so I think that's like where a lot of the disconnect is with this, is that people know that it happened. I think most people tend to believe that MK Ultra is what people say it was, that our government ran experiments, but the perception is these were consenting adults who were taken advantage of, and that really sucks, but it wasn't that many people and it doesn't affect me, so I shouldn't care. And we leave out the whole part where no, that was part of it. Of course, they used adults too, but they ended up realizing that children were better for this. And so they kind of threw out that whole aspect of using just adults and, started doing this to children.
Yeah, I think you bring up an excellent point, Emma. Um, because survivors that speak out, it's usually as adults because it takes that long before their memories it can surface and then they can feel safe enough if they feel safe enough. But we're labeled as conspiracy theorists and, like labeled and put into that like satanic panic. That's the argument they use. All that was never proven, or all this stuff, or like we're spreading misinformation if we talk about the COVID stuff. But yeah, they're forgetting the children. They're forgetting that this happens without anyone's consent. No child consents to having this done, whether it happens, in familial instances where there's multi-generational abuse that passes down, or, like a child goes to church or a camp or, whatever, and then it starts, to them there. They do not consent. There
Mm.
is no way that they are even aware of what's happening. They're innocent. And meanwhile, traffickers and all of these criminal networks, they're making multi-billion dollars a year off of these children and teens and adults. And it's like, it is so important for them to keep it hidden, to keep it from being exposed, that they will do anything. They do not care about the children. They don't care about people. They care about the almighty dollar and, where their power and greed is going to continue. And that's what is forgotten is the children. And these children are still being abused, and these mind control projects are still happening. It's not something that stopped just because the government said something about it and, oh, that doesn't happen anymore, like the radiation acknowledgement. Um, that's another thing that I had happened to me is my whole left side was radiated with radiation. And I have had so many medical things that happened from on my left side only. And, just this past month, I had a root canal done after having a tooth back farther that had to be pulled. Um, oh, just maybe 2 years ago. But then recently having this root canal with another tooth. And then even after spending the money for a root canal, I'm not complaining, I'm just saying the truth here. Having that same tooth that I just spent lots of money on because my dental insurance ran out for the year, uh, part of that tooth broke and a couple little pieces broke off. And now I'm facing more money and dental work, which is it's so hard to have to go to a dentist or have medical procedures done uh, after having the medical experimentation. And, I get through it and everything, but there's no compensation. And I know that those are direct effects of the radiation that was done to me. Can I prove that? No. But I've had so many cysts and biopsies done and removed from my left breast. And just I had a cyst removed from the left side of me on the outside of my colon. Um, just all sorts of things. And I think of the so many people that with unrecognized trauma that don't know that this is, maybe a direct result of, the abuse that they've had, and how as long as uh, the people that are in high places that don't acknowledge this, don't acknowledge where these effects are coming from, these survivors spend years of suffering and anguish and money that it costs them to try to figure out what's going on. Because sometimes it can be body memories. Sometimes it can be something serious going on that they really need care for. And when we're disconnected from our bodies, sometimes we don't even feel something that's going on that needs attention. And it's just, there's so much that continues for each survivor, to get the therapy that they need, to get the medical care, dental care that they need, and to have the support that they need. All of their needs are so important, and that's another thing. We're dehumanized to the point where we don't feel like we deserve to have our needs met. And, that takes a lot of like rehabilitating from therapy or from other people saying you deserve to have your needs met. You deserve to have your mind and your emotions and your life and your body and to be connected with all of you. And it's sad to see the effects, but it's also hopeful and exciting to see the way that survivors are speaking out and telling each other, that, hey, you deserve to have your life and you deserve to have your needs met. And it's okay to have needs. And you're so worthwhile and you're of so much value just for being the wonderful person that you are, not for anything you do. And trafficking is so horrible on top of what's already being done with the dehumanization. In my trafficking, every time money was put on the nightstand and I had to hand that money to my handler who stood in the doorway, um, I always had to say, "This is all I'm worth." And each time I did that, he said, "No, you're not worth anything. You're nothing." And and then I had already had some rituals where I was given a little piece of gold. I don't even know if it was really gold, but by these people dressed up in pirates telling me that I sold my soul to the devil. And so every time I would give that money after being horrifically raped and trafficked, over and over again, I gave that money to my trafficker. And that condition statement that I sold my soul to the devil and this is all that I'm worth, and I don't even get to keep any of it, that has stuck with me for so long that I'm still breaking free of the effects of that. But just this month, in one of my prayer ministry sessions, um, Jesus told me that I was priceless, and to him, I was worth more than any gold or any money on this earth. And I really believe that is true of every single person that's had this and is dehumanized and exploited. No person should ever be for sale. No child, no teen, no adult, no person. And I don't ever believe that people really choose that for a lifestyle because they've already had sexual abuse, they've already had exploitation, even if it hasn't been for money yet. Um, I don't think there should ever be women called prostitutes. Um, they're they're survivors. They're priceless. They're people that deserve better. And I am just so amazed at how God is healing so many people and teaching them the same things He's teaching me and helping me to reclaim ourself, that was God given.
Well said, Sherry. Oh my gosh, I had chills and I feel like I could bawl my eyes out after listening to that. It's so powerful. And you couldn't be more right. The dehumanization. I mean, a little precious child, you know, that would crush an adult to hear that. It does crush adults when somebody dehumanizes them if they're in an abusive relationship or around somebody who makes comments to them that are very degrading. That can wear on their soul for the rest of their life and cause trauma as an adult. Somebody whose brain is fully formed and they can think, and you think about these things being told to a little child who should just be out playing and being loved and
Yeah,
coming home to dinners that are made from their parents and cuddles at night, and to think that you're being told that, it's just like so heartbreaking, and I think that that's like it's a really big pain point for survivors, especially when, we were talking the other day on the phone. It's like it's the total opposite. You guys are recognized, and whether or not these things should actually be valued in society is totally debatable. Like there's no bloodline that's like way better than somebody else's to where they deserve to be rulers of the world or where it gives them permission to abuse somebody. Of course not. But your
right.
bloodlines are important. Sometimes blood types. You have high IQs. Most of you have very highly developed psychic or spiritual gifts. You guys have the ability to dissociate, which I love that you call it dissociative identity response, that it's a gift that you're given to survive. But your brain does compartmentalize, it does fracture, your mind does, and you do go through extensive training and conditioning with many different things. A lot of you had public speaking or writing or musical, combat, martial arts. There's so many things that they train you in to where you have all these different skill sets and you're able to solve problems quicker because you have different parts that can work together to see the world in different ways, different skill sets. And so it's horrible that they tell you all these things because you guys are some of the most just absolutely incredible humans in the world. And again, I'm not ranking people. Just because somebody wasn't abused doesn't
Right.
mean that they're not special. But they pick you
Yes, they
specifically
are.
because they think that you're special, because they know that you're capable of going through and surviving all these things that they're going to put you through. They
Mhm.
know that you're special and they do everything they can to tell you that you're not. That way you don't take what they're conditioning you for and what you were born with and use it against them. That is their worst fear. And so it's just freaking
Yes,
beautiful. Like hearing you today, you took that power back. It no longer belongs to them, and
right.
that is their biggest fear, that you realize that no, you are special, that you are priceless, that you are gifted, that you are just incredible, you're amazing, you're brilliant, you're beautiful. Like they wanted to take that from you because they knew that if it wasn't controlled by them, that it would turn into a weapon against them. And now survivors get
Yes,
to do that. You guys get to take your gifts
yes,
back. You're creating all these beautiful businesses and projects and podcasts and books and all music. I mean, the things that you're doing with all the gifts that you have now, it's beautiful and they're serving humanity, in a really positive way. You're able to now fill your cup with what you want to use those things for and then share them with people, and I love so much that you've come this far to where you can hear that message from God and receive it, and to where now you can believe that and see through the facade of what they told you. But you're right. A lot of people don't get there and they relive that. And as adults, they're so crushed by those things that they were told that now their worth is dependent on selling themselves. And so they do go into the adult entertainment industry. They go into strip clubs because that's what their price tag is I'm only available as a product. That's where my worth is to somebody else, and it makes me really sad when people make fun of these women and men that get into these industries because I see the same thing. I see victim written all over these individuals. Nobody that's like all healed and was raised in a very loving home and has a loving spouse and support system around them. That's not something that type of person thinks, oh, I'm going to go do this one day. That is
Right.
that's a direction many times. And there might be some people here and there that like they choose to do that and they genuinely enjoy it, and that's fine on them. But I believe, 99% of the people in that industry are victims of sexual abuse, of trafficking, even of things that you've went through, the torture and mind control, because they couldn't break that. They didn't have the support to realize that they're actually priceless, and that they're worth so much
Right.
more than having to be a commodity for other people, that that's not what you're here for. You're here to do so much more than that. And I love that you broke free of that. And like I said, I just love that your story has, obviously it's a lifelong journey, but you have such a happy ending where you are now, in love and in life and in the things that you're realizing and accepting about yourself. It's just so wonderful, and it's so inspiring for other survivors to see that, who are suffering with those things and saying, "Oh, I'm worthless." Like, why me? Why me? And it's like, why you? Because you're special, because you were smart, because you have spiritual gifts, because you're from these bloodlines that they value. Like, it's not because you're
Mhm.
worthless or anything like that. It's because you were valued so high that they chose you,
Yes.
you know?
And they do encourage our gifts, and get us to be writers and singers and dancers and like just all these different things. Um, I think of how, as survivors, we become a threat to the very people that thought we would never grow up and go against them. Not in a like repaying evil for evil way, but just like, I grew up. I know what you did to me type thing. And it's like, I'm going to take my life back. And I have taken my life back. And when we find our voice and we use it, whether it's, pages in a journal or to our therapist or a support person, or being, writing a blog, or, like sharing it with a person that you can trust, or, speaking out like you do, Emma, and you have provided that platform for other survivors to do, or like with what I do, it's like we do become a threat. And that's why all these civil suits and stalking injunctions and stuff is happening to people, because they are like, oh crap, you know, we didn't expect this. We got to do something about this. But I'm excited at the same time about the gifts that I've reclaimed for my own self. I've written a book, a journal called Surrendered, Embracing God's Will and Receiving God's Blessings. It's on Amazon. And then I'm hoping to publish my second book, Women of Purpose, Shared Identity, Unique Calling, which is going to be on Amazon too. Um, I also, you mentioned this in my introduction, I've been taking the writing that my parts have written for over the years, and I have around 500 songs that I've written from those writings, and that it's been a neat way to hear the different parts of me and really connect with, how music is so touching. It touches your emotions and your soul, and it bypasses conditioning and everything. But I do have 7 albums, like on Spotify and Apple Music and iTunes and other streaming platforms. And also, it's just so neat to have accomplished, like the things that I have for my own self. And I'm hoping that I can uh, connect with other survivors through my music, because some of my music actually has been what has kept me alive. First, the poetry and the writing, but it wasn't that long ago. It was this year. I wrote a song. Um, and I can't remember the specific title of it, but it is actually what kept me alive that week. And I know it is something that, I'm pushing past conditioning to actually make money for myself. But I really know that this can help. so many people to take back their minds and their emotions and their bodies and say, like, no, I'm not going to be in this anymore. And if Sherry can do it, if other survivors can do it, I know I can do it. And I I don't like, I'm humbly saying this. If I can break conditioning and years of programming and mind control and connect with the parts of me, like little children and teens and very hurting parts, that were in dungeons and basements and cemeteries, who thought they were in hell, who thought they were dead, who literally did not even believe they existed anymore. So can every single survivor out there. And when they know somebody believes them, um, they it gives them hope and it helps them to know they're not alone. Is that my goal to make money? No. My goal is to help others reclaim their voice and show them, like, this is possible for you too. If I make money off of the book, my music, that would be great. But God did tell me one day, as long as my worth is tied to money at all, He doesn't want that for me. So He's allowed me to not be able to make money until that part of me is healed. And I believe that now that Jesus told me that I'm priceless, that's like his go ahead, like now to say, okay, buy my music, listen to, buy my book, because it will help you,
Yes.
not not so much that it will bring me income. Because in 2019, I was at the Ark Encounter in the Creation Museum, and I was a mess. I was literally a mess. Flashbacks, nightmares, uh, being afraid to go anywhere. Um, I was in a bathroom and it's not like I heard a voice, but in my head, I heard, and I was like, is this my thought? No, that I want you to be a voice for the voiceless and speak out for those who can't speak for themselves. And I was like, I knew it was God. And I looked up in front of me, and on the other side of the stall door, there was a poster of a woman speaker and for an upcoming conference or something. And I was like, oh God, it is you. And uh, I'm like, how do you expect me to do this? I'm a mess. And he showed me that little bit by little bit with the website and the blog and the YouTube channel and connecting with other survivors. Um, just it's been easy because he's in it and he always makes a way where there seems to be no way.
Amen. What a powerful story of reclaiming, and redemption and overcoming just impossible odds. And I completely agree with you. If you and others can do it, anybody can, no matter how helpless you feel on the other side of the screen. That's where everybody, Sherry was there at one point too, and probably, still grapples with some of those feelings, like she said, of
Yeah.
despair and sadness. And, it's something you constantly have to overcome. Even people that didn't go through the type of abuse that you do have intrusive thoughts and insecurities and, just days where you just don't feel good. And I think that that's like, a thing that's missing a lot in our normal conversations in everyday life. We try to put filters on whenever we post photos, and when people ask us how we're doing, we always say, I'm doing great, how are you? And
Mhm.
not that we don't want to be positive and, rays of light in the world, but so many people who we look at and we think, gosh, that person has it all together, that person's perfect, I wish I was like them. you know Nobody has the perfect life, and a lot of times the more perfect something seems, the more dysfunction there is a lot of times behind the scenes. And these stories and these testimonies exemplify that. Who would guess a gifted and talented kid was going home and being trafficked or experimented on? Who would guess that,
Mhm.
these children that are musically gifted or have all these different skills that they're using in school plays or musicals, or, band concerts, sports, those kids. And you hear these stories of what was actually going on behind the scenes, and the families that they came from, people that work in government, military people, people that are business owners in a local town, doctors, pharmacists, lawyers, judges, chief of police. You look at, like, we're so conditioned to like value these titles, priests, nuns, and to just automatically trust people because of what they are, what they've accomplished, and we do that with children, we do that with adults, and it's a huge misconception because just because somebody has a title, just because somebody looks a certain way, doesn't mean that they are. Those people could be predators, or
Yeah.
they could be victims. They could be survivors that are deeply deeply in despair, and they're coming forward and smiling anyways, and I love having these conversations because it sort of breaks that ice and hopefully can give people confidence to have compassion when they're out and about. I had a podcast guest recently who said, when you're statistically speaking, when you're at a grocery store, wherever you go, and you see children walking, try to think that probably at least 50% of those kids are being abused in some way. And it's like, man, what a
Yeah.
different way to look at the world. And the same way with adults, the people that we pass, we could be passing predators when we're out and about, people that are doing this to their children that look great. They're in a suit and tie and they're friendly, they're charismatic, and then on the other end, we could be passing by people who are going through something like what you did and going out and then going home and being horrifically abused. So we really do have to have that compassion for people, and realize that we're all capable of overcoming those things that make us feel despair and sadness and depression, and that those were thoughts that somebody else gave us. That was not a thought that God had for us. That's not a thought ever that, somebody that would be talking to us in love would ever say. Those are abusive things that we're told to condition to take your power away. And so I
Mhm.
really appreciate you shining a light on that because I think it's going to touch a lot of people on the other side of the screen who are suffering in some way, and to just have that reminder of like, look at everything I survived. Look at everything I went through, but I think I can't get through this that's happening right now. Of course I can. I went through all of that and I survived it. So I can totally get through whatever it is today that I'm dealing with.
And for survivors that are going through like nightmares and memories and flashbacks and trigger after trigger, and like, because there's a time period where that happens. Um, we've already survived what already happened to us. And so when you're dealing with, those memories and connecting with the parts of your mind that, um, it just feels so overwhelming. It's like I would tell myself, we survived this already. We're going to survive the feelings of it. And you don't have to go back into all the memories of everything that's ever happened to you. And um, I just want to encourage people to hang in there and to know that one thing that really helped me to remember, and I still remember this, is like, okay, I can breathe through this. I can, like get the body responses back down to normal a little bit so that I can regulate my emotions. But emotions have a peak, but they come back down, like, and whatever we can do when we feel that child inside of us that feels terrified is to like do the things that we can do now in the present day, whether it's like, okay, this is 2025, I'm safe if you are safe. It doesn't work if you're not. And then to just remind the part of you to no, we're going to get through this. And the more the childlike parts of us know that the adult in us now is taking care of us and can handle things, uh, the more uh, the more parts of our mind know this, then we can like have that breakthrough even through the um, horrific memories. And then sometimes there's triggers that cause flooding. and conditioning to be set off, like self-harm programs. And sometimes it happens as a result of getting too close to memories in therapy, or sometimes it happens because someone has done that on purpose, to cause that. And sometimes it's internal parts that are setting things off because they think that's what they're supposed to do. And so it can be a one or more of those, but conditioning does break down, and it is possible, as I have proven and many other survivors have, that I think of the people that have, talked like years ago and are still, talking, and they're free, and their programming, doesn't affect them anymore. And um, I actually have talks with my son and over the phone, and my daughter, who's they're dealing with their own trauma, and some of the things that my son especially has told me, it's like years ago I wouldn't have even been able to listen to him, and I've been able to be present and be there for him, and be there for other survivors. But um, survivors have such compassionate hearts, and um, we were conditioned to believe that we can't trust ourselves. We can't, uh, like trust emotions or ever feel anger because it's going to go out of control or whatever the fear is. But um, we can um, connect with those parts and we don't have to fear what they're going to tell us, because they are the reason that we survived. They are they know what happened to us, and we can believe them. Yeah, are all these things that you remember every exact detail true? No, some of it was probably staged. Some of it is definitely orchestrated by these groups and networks to cause you to believe things that aren't true. But a child the child in us believed it. And so it's important to believe them, even if it's not all accurate and you don't have all the details. But believing them um, is something that's so uh, helpful to overcome the programmed lies. And when we can connect with the part that had the programming happen and connect with the lie that's been suggested, the adult in us can reason it through with that child part and say, did did that really happen? Uh, is this our own thought, or is this conditioning? We're an adult now, so we can decide together what we want to believe. And conditioning does break down. I'm thankful that that is one thing that they didn't count on. Same thing with us growing up and becoming adults and remembering and no longer being silent.
Absolutely. And one thing that I did want to make sure that I asked you that you brought up, because this is to me one of the most important things right now that we can help guide society to understand and survivors through, is that moment or moments, many moments sometimes, where self-harm or self-elimination programming does kick in. If you don't even know what MK Ultra is or mind control, and you're waking up to all these horrible memories, and all of a sudden you're triggered into a brainwave, a brain state that wants you to literally hurt yourself in a moment. We need to prepare society to be able to support somebody around them that might go through that, to be able to stop it and coach somebody through it. We need to make therapists aware of this and helpers. And most importantly, we need to help survivors through those moments so they don't take action on it when their body wants to and is pressing them to. I wanted to ask how you got through and get through those moments whenever that has kicked in for you. What worked to help stop that?
Yeah. Before I actually could trust God or Jesus at all, my husband, he was my biggest support. And therapy, wasn't really what I could trust. um, just because of all the and self-harm. But one of the things I did do is I wrote up a agreement. I don't like the word contract. Agreement with all of my parts that if they feel like they want to harm, um, they have to agree on this paper not to do so, and we will talk about it first, and we will connect with our support person, whether it's our husband or our therapist. That was helpful. Another thing that helped was to write down phone numbers of safe people, people that I could reach out to, because, my husband's not always going to be there. Um, and kind of like I put together, and this is the resource section of the website at ariseandshineafterabuse.com. I put together a crisis plan and a medical directive, but it's like a mental health directive. And so I did this because probably about 3 years ago, I ended up in the mental ward after having a knee replaced. And I was like, I have to keep this from happening again. So by having sort of like a plan so that when a part of you is feeling suicidal or like they have to get into self-harm, because this is serious and um, those parts don't always know that there's a different option. They think that this is the only choice because this is the only choice they were given. So by having like put away knives, put away pills, put away everything to have maybe I've done that with my husband, having him help me with that, hiding the car keys. But you can't do that with people that you can't trust because then it feels like, oh my gosh, they have this you know, uh, and I don't have control. It has to be somebody that you really trust and that is a supportive person and that will work with you on it. Um, and I was able to connect with the parts who were programmed to do these things. And it would usually be when I was getting close to memories that I was not supposed to remember. And so this part was the conditioned part that was supposed to then follow through with the conditioned response of harming me. I never acted on it. I never once acted on it. There was one day when that part of me, I had enough pills for like some anxiety here and there, maybe like about 4 pills. And like that's going to harm me, right? So anyway, they grabbed the pill bottle and they were like, we're going to take this. And they were doing it in front of my husband. They wanted help to resist it. And so by having someone that can like work with me like he did, or if a person has that in their life, like where they can set up these fail safes for when this happens, it really worked because they really want help. They don't think that there's another way or another option. And so by giving them different options, like, and then I would put like little journals in different rooms and pens and markers, like for anyone who wanted to write something, even if it's just say help me or because that word is actually a conditioned thing. So if a person that is programmed calls 911, that actually activates some in me anyway, it activated more programming on top of what I was already going through because reporter parts are supposed to call someone.
Mm.
And so in doing that, it sets off a lot more programming. And then that can get into a lot more complicated um, harm in itself, where it's actually causing the person harm instead of helping. We're not supposed to ever get real help, is, the conditioned belief. And so I do not recommend going to an ER unless you absolutely have to. I recommend talking with someone that you can really trust. And sometimes you don't know who you can trust. But sometimes by talking and saying, this is what's happening, this is what I feel like I need to do, uh, sometimes just using our voice interrupts that programming, or writing something down so that the adult in us can connect with that part, and it really did help to have a crisis plan, to have these numbers that I could call, to have like this mental health directive so that I would know that these are my wishes, like I do not want to go into a mental ward. I need somebody to talk to. Please help me to do that. Um, 3 years ago, after having a total knee replacement, this is just proof that, you know, there's no perfect person, there's no perfect way of doing this. But my husband, of all people, he's been my biggest support. He's wonderful. He's amazing, but he said that he would care for me after having this knee replaced. And I was in so much physical pain. And I even asked him, a part of me asked him, are you sure you can handle this? And he's like, yeah, yeah, so I had the knee replaced in a university hospital, and I was in so much pain physically. It took a couple hours to get home. And by the time we got home, I was in so much pain. And this is when my traffic parts started coming forward, and they were literally terrified. And then the medical experimented parts were coming forward because we had this ice machine that Frank would put around my knee and have to elevate my leg. And so what started happening, we both found ourselves in a position that we were not prepared for. And he cared so much about the pain I was in. And, he was taking on that he was triggering me and causing me problems and more suffering, that he became so frustrated, and he was like, like he didn't know what to do. And like he was taking care of all of my physical needs and keeping on the schedule of pain medication and icing, but he didn't realize, and neither did I, that when he was bringing me pain medication, I felt like he was drugging me and
Mm.
trafficking me. And when he was connecting me with that machine that had the cooling water that was helping my knee, I didn't know, and neither did he, that these parts that had been experimented on in the medical lab projects, it's like they thought he was going to administer electric shock, and it just became this where I couldn't sleep then, and I was the parts were afraid of him. And previously, most of me knew that he was the most supportive person on the face of the earth, and so I ended up getting into like constant fight, flight, freeze. And, like I couldn't get those responses back down long enough. And I tried to, like he'd fix us something to eat. And then during the time I'm trying to eat, I'm trying to explain all of this to him, and how he can help me. And he got it after 2 weeks of doing that and not having other people help, because just the situation we were in at the time. Um, my daughter has 7 kids and she couldn't help. And, there's so many people that are so busy. But anyway, so we got in a situation that it was so re-traumatizing because he didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do. And we were both just like feeding off of each other's like defensiveness and helplessness, powerlessness that we found ourselves in. And so he started yelling at me. And then the parts of me were, you know, like, um, like so scared of him. And then, so he ended up calling 911. And this is when, after I got out of the hospital, I put this crisis plan and mental health directive together for other survivors, because I never wanted anything like that to happen to them either. But he called 911 because he really didn't know what to do. And I had a protective part come out, who sat him down in the living room one night, and he's like, "You're going to listen to me." And he's telling my husband, "You need to listen to me, or she's not going to make it. She's going to die." I actually was starting to shut down. My system was starting to shut down. And I wasn't in a position where I could help myself. And so PT, I call him, he came out with my husband and he was like, "This is what you're going to do, buddy." And he's like, "You're going to sleep in the other room and you're going to take your alarm clock and all this stuff with you." And so Frank started feeling like he was being controlled.
Mm.
And it was a thing I had to do or we wouldn't have made it. But so anyway, he ended up calling 911 and like I was having lack of sleep. I needed to feel safe. I needed an environment where I could just have somebody that's not emotionally involved, and that's feeling so powerless and helpless to, that's not emotionally connected with, taking things personally and all that, to just be that emotional support more than anything. And so I ended up being in a mental ward for 16 days. And the ER, they did the swab up the nose, to check me for COVID. And I felt like I was literally being re-abused with the medical stuff. Um, it felt like very, like I would call it nose rape. Um, and then they had to take another one because they might take me to another hospital facility. And I'm like, "You already have one." And they called me combative. They said that I was psychotic. I was running on low sleep. All I needed to do was feel safe and sleep and feel like I could just get the care that I needed with people that could, do that. They promised me when I went into the mental ward, that I would have all of my physical needs taken care of. No. And they also had me talk. They never once asked me if I felt safe. They never asked me um, if I needed someone to talk to, and they were not trauma informed at all. And so I spent 16 days in hell with my Bible, and I was hanging onto my Bible. And during that time, I was using an old rickety walker, and I wasn't supposed to be doing the things that I was doing in there. And because they take away everything that you have. And so they were not trauma informed, and it was just like there was a loud noise, and like, I didn't yell, but I went, "Ah," and all of a sudden there's three guys coming at me while I'm sitting down, and it's like they have to stop someone from having a trauma reaction because it's disturbing the other patients. So then they put me in this isolation where I was in this enclosed space, and um, I literally, the scenes from prison movies where the toilet's way far down, and there was a toilet seat that was so far down, and they had cameras on me at all times. And I was in this little room where there was no handicap accessible things that I needed. I was not allowed to have my CPAP machine or my ice machine in the room there. So I had to sit out in the lobby where everyone else was, day area or whatever it was, and have my leg dangling down when it's supposed to be propped up with pillows. And then, I could use the ice machine, but I didn't get the care that I needed physically. I was only 2 weeks out of having a total knee replaced. But what I learned in that time is that God was really there for me. He didn't leave me. And I knew that he allowed it for a purpose. And so after I got out of there, I got a hold of that hospital and I said, "I am not going to pay you for the care that I didn't get. And I said, the 2010 American Disability Act says that you have to have accessible accommodations for people that are either disabled from surgery or permanently disabled. And I brought this whole case before the hospital and without a lawyer because I contacted a lawyer. I wasn't after money or anything, but I wanted changes. And that's where my little activist, my activism started, because it was like, if they're doing this to me, they're doing this to other people.
Mhm.
And because I spoke up, even though it was a hospital, and you think you don't go against hospitals and, you don't use your voice. I used my voice and they made changes. They have handicap accessible facility and the noise that actually caused that trauma response because they were already making a new behavioral health unit. And so I was thankful that because of what happened, not only was I able to, like make some changes that did happen there, but also that I could know what would this have been like for someone that was still caught in trafficking?
Right.
And how can I help prevent this from happening to other people? Because we're treated worse than animals. I mean, animals are treated better sometimes. And when there's people that are not willing to hear us and to believe that any of these things happen, and how do you tell them when you've like when your responses are triggered? It's like I had to write an email in my email on the way to the hospital, like what to tell them. I've had lack of sleep. This is what's happening. Please hear me. And they didn't hear me. They didn't listen. And if we can have something in writing ahead of time to say, this is what I want, this is what I don't want, this is what I need, because when we're in those emotional places where we can't see our way out, we can advocate for ourselves with having, mental health directives and having, things put in place as much as possible.
That's so horrible. I've heard that so many times. And you think about, I mean, you just go back and reflect on all the things that you said that you went through as a child that you broke out of. And so you're on a quest to continually feel free, to be sovereign, to not feel in control, to constantly combat the programming of you're worthless, you're this, you're that, and all these really negative things. You're constantly having to work through that. And then you get put into somewhere that locks you back up like how you were whenever you're a kid. They treat you like you're a kid, like you can't even, hold a pencil without it being a weapon. They treat you like you're a kid. They administer drugs without making it
Yes.
compassionate. Well, you were forced to have drugs as a kid too. That was a big part of the
Yeah.
programming, is them forcing that on you, restraining you, putting in enclosed spaces, putting you, not listening to you, gaslighting you. And so you look at all the ways that because society doesn't know about trauma, doesn't know about DID, doesn't know about the experimentation that was and is still going on with children, that there's such a disconnect with all the people that are available to help in these industries, therapists, medical professionals, even psych wards. You think about if a psych
Yeah.
ward was trauma informed and could actually have a survivor come in that they know to handle with care, and they're listening to them and saying, how can we keep you safe here? What can we do to accommodate you and help you through this hard time? What do you need? They'd realize how backwards it is, that it's total opposite of what they provide. You don't need to be in an enclosed space in a straitjacket. You don't need medicine forced on you. You literally, like you said, just needed somebody to make you feel safe, to listen to you and to care
Yeah.
for
That's
you
all I needed.
without getting emotional, and without knowing all of this, like we're so abusive to survivors without even meaning to be, even really
Yes.
well-meaning people who are doing they're working in a place like that because they're passionate about helping people and don't even realize that they're not helping, that they're doing the opposite. They're harming people by treating them that way. And I love, however, that spawned that activist part of you where you were like, I need to help now. Like, this isn't okay. I need to speak up for myself. I need to speak up for the other survivors that may be going through a hard time and being pushed through these facilities as well. Because let's face it, a lot of them do. That's a playbook thing too. Your husband did it in a well-meaning way.
Oh,
He was doing
yes.
his best in those moments, but most of the time, the reason why a survivor ends up in there is because the family gaslights them or somebody around. They're crazy. They need locked up. Look what they're saying. They're saying all satanic rituals that happened. Lock them up. They're crazy. And so that's what happens. But like how re-traumatizing all of that must have been. And then you have to go home and you're injured too, and you have to like resettle your nervous system and figure out how to heal from what should have been healing for you and was abusive. So I totally agree with you. It's such a shame, that there's not much safety out there in the world for survivors going through this, that they're really having to go online and Google by themselves in those instances, having to make their own
Yes.
lists of safe people, having to have everything in place themselves for if something
Yeah,
goes wrong. So they can say, all right, I'm going to take care of myself because nobody else is going to. And that's so sad,
exactly.
because we even take care of drug addicts. We take care
Hmm.
of veterans, we take care of everybody else that has something that we look at as being debilitating or something that is getting in somebody's way or trauma. But when it comes to abuse survivors, because we don't know the truth of what people went through like you, it's not widely known and how it works, that we're just like re-abusing people over and over and over again who are already trying so hard just to keep their head above water.
Yeah. And I think of the survivors that don't have the resources that I had, uh, um, that
Exactly.
they, like, how do they advocate for themselves during a time when, their need is like right now, and they're in crisis or whatever, and then's not the time to be able to make decisions that are best for them, maybe, or, phone calling, or looking online for resources that can really help them. Like they're not in a space where they have the, um, like where when you're not in crisis, you can think. You can think clearly. And when you're dealing with programming and multiple parts that and multiple layers of conditioning, it gets even more important than during those times to have somebody that, can advocate for you. Uh, because I always wished that I had that, like I was my biggest advocate, and my husband was my biggest support. But sometimes I would wish that he would advocate for me, like, well, why aren't you like, standing up for me and, demanding that, this be done? And, it's like not everybody is created that way. Some of us can do that, and some of us are more laid back and, have different qualities about us that, we're not all the same.
100%, yes. And what a miracle again that you made it through that, and
It
that now
is.
you can help educate on that, you can help teach. And that's amazing that after you left, it's too bad they didn't listen to you while you were in there, but I'm really happy that they had the integrity to listen to you after you left and to hopefully mitigate instances of trauma happening as severely as they did to you in the future with the subtle changes that they made based off your recommendations. And you are
Yeah.
doing a lot of advocacy work now, and I wanted to talk about that a little bit because your work is it's amazing all the things that you're dipping your toes into and the projects that you're working on. And there's still so much more that you're doing that isn't even out there yet. But I wanted you to talk about your website and your podcast and your resource page and thought maybe we could go through your website a little bit, share your music again and where people can get that, share about your social media and where you're at, and just start digging into the work that you're doing now because it's really profound and wonderful.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Um, the website is ariseandshrineafterabuse.com, and I had to switch from Wix.com to Hostinger. just because of the price. So anyway, it's got a different look to it now, and I'm not as happy with it, but there is my blog, and there's a resources page. I have quite extensive resources. And I do want to invite anyone who wants to be blogging as a guest on the website. Please feel free to contact me through the Arise and Shine After Abuse website if you are interested in doing that. Um, I have a big page with the indicators of ritual abuse, um, um, and that's directly from a very I love the person. I can't think of her name, but these are it's an extensive list of different things that are a part of our experience that people can be looking for. And like you can see, it's very long and extensive. And she's got it in categories. But Catherine Gould, that's who put this together. Thank you, Catherine, if you're still out there somewhere. And so then there's a page for the podcasts. I haven't put all of mine on here because I started to do more on my YouTube channel, but some of them are on here. Um, and then, yeah, I see you going to my YouTube channel.
Here we go.
Yeah, I'm very excited about the different parts of me that have put these podcasts and videos together. It's a mixture of both. And more recently, I've been getting into the activism. So, like, that's the one about Dr. Kirk Moore, and then Goel, who's got the stalking injunction against him, and Jason and Alexia having the civil suit. And I've been connecting with the survivors in Utah, um, and really like have become a whistleblower along with them and what's happening there. And some of my parts made a lot of these videos. And it's like, I love the one about justice, and honoring survivors. That shows my heart for survivors and the injustices that we all have, that has been done against us. And there's a guy, Mike Chapman. I interviewed him, and that's a neat perspective to get a male's point of view about abuse. And then I have some personal ones on there too, like that Happy Birthday Jay for my son. Those are just different things, that I have put together. And the Amber Waves of Anger, that's one of my poems, spoken word. Um, and I loved how I used videography for my parts to connect with each other and, in my journey, to heal from all of this. And I originally started just doing a little bit here and there with, probably about 6 or 7 years ago. Um, Even like Marshalltown, Iowa had a tornado, and I put together this video because I really cared about the people, that were had that, to rebuild from, and I felt like it was similar to what any person goes through from a tragedy. Um, and I just am doing a project, and I have Justice up there. I'm starting to put together a training, um, and justice, not that it will be out there that this is what it is, but justice stands for Jesus unveiling systemic torture and trafficking, injustices, and cultic exploitation. That's the name that God gave me for the project. Um, like I said, I don't know if that's the name that will be out there, but it's a way to give training to clinicians, law enforcement, people in hospitals and mental health facilities, and people that will come across survivors, and it's an exciting project to be a part of, and it will be available. And I'm putting it together for Relentless Hope. Um, and I'm working with Cindy on that. That she's not doing all the coming up with the program, but I'm doing that. So to take a little bit off of her shoulders because she's got so much going on. And I started helping with the support group that Relentless Hope has twice a month, every second and fourth Tuesday. Um, and I'm coming up with, like lining up the speakers for the topics. And um, I've been bringing a series just recently, managing fear and navigating or connecting with parts that are afraid. And so, um, anyway, if you're interested in coming to that support group that Relentless Hope has, you would need to get a hold of them so that they don't just allow anybody into the support group because they want to make sure that it's survivors and that you can connect with them first to kind of share your situation, and they're happy to have you be on the. Oh yeah, there's my name there. Yep. Yeah, it's exciting what the organization that Cindy founded with Relentless Hope. They have resources on their website too. Please check that out. They are an organization that you can trust. I know that there's survivors that have said the National Trafficking Network numbers and website that they have had horrible things happen. So I've been reconsidering whether to even have anything like that on, like the National Human Trafficking Hotline on my website or not. You you think that you can trust organizations that in and you can believe that they are who you say how they s- you are- they are who they say they are, but that's not always true. And I really listen to other survivors who tell me, well, this isn't safe, or this is my experience. So yeah, Relentless Hope is great. Cindy's got such a heart for survivors, and she's not a survivor herself either. So I really think that's neat how, people have put organizations together and, you know, they she's a volunteer. She gives of her time and from her heart to help other survivors too. And I love their page. It says you are not alone.
She's wonderful. I've had Cindy on my podcast once and was just absolutely amazed by what she's doing. If people listening didn't hear that episode, you should go listen to it. I stand by her as well. There's not many organizations, nonprofits, even people out there that, aren't survivors that are ever advocating. I don't really put my name or stamp of approval or recommendation on a lot, but man, I'm impressed with Cindy. She is a firecracker. She is a bulldog. She is a
Yep.
warrioress, and she is a freaking champion, and she'll be actually coming back on the podcast again soon too. She's doing some incredible work behind the scenes that she wants to educate on currently. A lot of stuff is happening in Utah because of her. She's helping stir the pot, big
Yeah.
time. And people like Goel, and there's, a lot of people really standing up against this, which is wonderful. And I'm really
Hmm.
grateful and happy that you found her organization and are involved. It makes me happy too to see survivors. And I know a couple other people that reached out to me and said, thank you because your podcast, I connected with Cindy and I'm helping her with something. And the more that we can help people like Cindy and like Sharri on their missions and, to step up and ask for help. This can be really thankless work sometimes. There isn't much pay, if at all, in helping, or recognition, unless you're sort of on the side of helping cover it up. Those are the people who really get paid for this. It's difficult to even have your voice heard if you are standing up for survivors. So it's wonderful that there's little pockets of people, groups of people, survivors and non-survivors who are really fighting this, tooth and nail and like pouring their heart and soul into it. And Cindy's definitely one of those people. So I'll have her website below as a resource. If you guys missed that episode, I'll put it below as well. And Sherry's website also, and her resource page is very extensive. And just her page in general, you guys can access her podcast through here, like she said. Her writing is just exquisite. It is awesome. She's wonderful with her words, as much on paper as she is here on a podcast format. Please go read her blog and share it. People can get a lot of help from reading helpful things written by survivors, and it's a great way to educate. In her podcast, I'll have her YouTube as well, but she has episodes on here too that you guys can go leaf through and read a little bit about. Click the link and it'll take you to it. She has videos. She has the indicators of ritual abuse, which is very helpful. I'm really happy that you took the time to put all this on your page as well. This needs to be seen by everybody. This is a wonderful resource and very extensive. So this is a great
Yeah, it
page to go
is.
just browse around and to learn, and to share with people. And survivors don't like typically asking for money, but in my experience, I get people all the time that reach out and say, how can I help? I have some extra money. I have some extra time. How can I contribute to this cause? I want to do something. I want to help, but I don't trust nonprofits. I don't trust different people. Sherry does have a PayPal as well, that you guys can um, buy her a coffee for. And she's not asking for your support. I'm asking you to support her if you're one of those people that reaches out and asks, because she is so deserving. This woman has poured her heart and soul into her work selflessly and hasn't made a penny for it. And we should be resourcing people like her and like Cindy, because there's people working in the CIA, FBI, even in nonprofits that are getting paid a lot of money to cover this up. And we need to pour resources into the people uncovering it and helping survivors heal from these crimes, literal crimes against humanity. And she's making books, she is making music, she's doing podcasts, she's helping volunteer her time to Relentless Hope with Cindy, who's also volunteering her time. And even if you're not out here asking for it and saying I need money, we should be resourcing you so you can continue to do this and buy and keep up with podcast equipment and be able to pay somebody to help you edit your book so survivors can get it in their hands, and to make money from your podcast that you're devoting hours of your time to. Like, I know I haven't written books and done a lot of the other stuff that you have, but I know just doing a podcast is expensive. It's a lot of work and it's a lot of time and energy, and um it can take up a lot of time in your week, just that. So I would ask if you guys do have $1, $5, if you have some extra money that you can send her way. I'm going to have her support page below. If you don't have anything financially that you can contribute, what you can do is go to her YouTube and subscribe. The more we can get followers up, it pops up more on recommendation pages. It helps get her seen. If you guys can go on her videos and comment on them, this all helps in the algorithms for survivors to be seen, because a lot of times this information is very suppressed. So this is something for free that you guys can do, and you guys can go share her episodes on your YouTube. If you guys have a Substack or if you guys are writers, you guys can also share her episodes that way. You guys can share resources on her page and then link her website. We can do things for free that if you have extra time and you're looking to put it somewhere, that is something that you guys can do that does not take much time or energy, and it doesn't require any money from you. So if you guys can please go support her. And on TikTok, she's on TikTok too, which is really cool. And I'll have that below too. Her handle is Sharri Burg, SharriBurg. But you can also search her through her full name as well, and her page will populate. But again, really easy way, just hit the follow button, and for free, you guys just supported a survivor. You're contributing to their cause, you're helping them get seen, and you're showing that you support them. So there's so many ways that we all can take responsibility. We can all have a part in this. And there's so many ways that we can make excuses for, I don't have time, I don't have this, I don't have money, but you don't always need a lot of money or time to make a big difference. So I would ask you all to please send your prayers Sherry's way, send send your $5 her way, go follow her music and get her albums and share with other survivors. Listen to them if you are a survivor. I love the names of your albums also. You can tell that they're from your heart and soul, from your parts, and devoted to to survivors. So you're doing a lot, Sharon. You deserve everything. You are priceless and you deserve all the resources possible to keep this work going. So thank you for everything that you're doing and for coming on here and for sharing everything that you did today. You are just an inspiration. I think I hold you just as high
Uh,
as Cindy and, everybody else in this movement that's like, really taking matters into their own hands. It takes a lot of courage to do what you do despite what you went through. You have every excuse in the world to be angry, to sit on your couch all day, to, want
right. I know.
revenge and to be hateful. And you're a ray of light, a ray of sunshine. And, you're a leader in this community. And we're so lucky that we have you here to learn from, to listen to, and to support.
Thank you so much, Emma. The music, the 7 albums that I have out are on Spotify
Yay.
or any of the streaming platforms. That one website that you brought up is actually my first attempt before I actually put any albums out there. They're like little singles.
Oh,
So
gotcha.
if you go to Spotify, you can find all 7 of the albums. There's like Sacred Rebellion, The Resuscitated Heart, Socialist Nation, Worth the Fight. I don't have all of the title. Arise from the Other Side, I think is the one of them. But anyway, yeah, it's exciting, and I would love other survivors and creatives to collaborate together. I would be willing to show people how to use the music app that I use, and actually how to take their writing and make songs. And we're so creative. I facilitate a writer's workshop for dissociative writers. .com. I'm one of the founding members, and I encourage people to join that. But I'm actually thinking that we could create our own community with specifically SRI survivors because we're so creative. And I've been doing that since 2019, I think it was. But I've done littles workshops and workshops for teens, for the parts to have stories. And it's just, littles are so amazing. And when we connect to those little child parts of us, there's so much more healing and we become more whole because we're listening to our own self. And they are so creative. So I encourage you to do it on your own, but I encourage you to become a part of some of the communities where we can connect with each other and, help each other to overcome, the restrictions that there's been on us. Whether it's doing a podcast together, I welcome that, or writing a blog, just connecting in any way that works for all of us.
Yes. Yes, you are just a walking miracle. You're a ray of light. I'm so grateful that we finally got to connect and do a podcast together and can't wait to have you back on. Was there anything else that we didn't cover today that you wanted to, or anything else that you wanted to share today?
First of all, thank you, Emma. And I think it's amazing. I wanted to say about Gray, um, how I just am in amazement of the miracle that he was able to show his face, and um, I would look. I feel like I know him already too, but um, just just keep doing what you're doing, Emma, and for all of the survivors out there and supporters of survivors, thank you for being the incredible you that you are, even if you don't know it, and you're not alone. And I hope that I've encouraged you today. And um, I always try to shine the hope that there is out there. So I hope that's been accomplished.
It was. We dove into some dark things, but there was always a light at the end of the tunnel. You guys have learned so much through what you've overcome that we can all learn from. And it's wonderful to see you on this side, that you're able to speak from a place of healing, of confidence, of taking your power back, and now of creation, of being able to contribute your puzzle piece with your voice and your testimony, as well as projects that you're working on. So I'm going to have all of Sharri's links below, you guys. Please go follow her, connect with her, donate to her, however you guys can help her on her mission. Please go do that. Like I said, it's so easy, and there's so many easy ways that we can all help without a lot of time or money. So I'll have all that below. I'm also going to have my links. Connect with me wherever you can, you guys. Connect with all of us wherever you can. A lot of these platforms aren't really friendly with this material that we talk about and these topics. So to keep in touch with us, follow us wherever you can, just in case one platform gets unhappy with one of us and what we're talking about and kicks us off. So I'll have all my links below as well, you guys. We couldn't do this without you. Like Sharri said, we're so grateful for all of you survivors speaking out, for all of you who aren't speaking out, but who are cheering us on and helping behind the scenes. And same thing for all you advocates and allies out there. We couldn't do this without you guys. So thank you guys for listening. God bless you all, and we will see you next time.